The prince was desperate because he had no translator, until the maid who spoke 8 languages saved him. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. Madeleine had learned to move like a shadow without becoming one. In the palace, shadows were safer than faces. A face could be remembered. A face could be blamed. A face could be dragged into conversations where it did not belong. Tonight, the grand reception was not for servants to admire. It was for servants to survive. She carried a silver tray through a corridor of silk and perfume, her eyes lowered, her steps measured. The chandeliers were bright, but the rules were brighter. No lingering, no listening, no mistakes. And yet the palace made listening unavoidable. The doors to the main salon stood open, and the sound of voices rolled out like a tide. French, of course, but also English, German, Italian, a thread of Russian, low and polished, even the syllables of Arabic, delivered with the calm of a man who knew he was being understood by no one of consequence. Madeleine adjusted her grip on the tray. Her fingers did not shake. Her stomach did. She had told herself her whole life that knowing was not the same as using. A maid could know 100 things and still remain safe, so long as she never proved she knew. But tonight, the air itself seemed intent on forcing her hand. Near the entrance to the salon, a footman hissed at her, "Move along." "I am moving," she murmured, and stepped past him with the obedience expected of her. Inside, the room was full. It always was, when the crown needed something. Madeleine did not lift her eyes far enough to count faces, only shoes and hems and gloved hands reaching for crystal. She recognized the stiffness of military dress without seeing the insignia. She recognized the easy dominance of men who had never been told to be quiet. At the center, slightly elevated by the space the crowd granted him, stood Prince Louis. He was younger than the room wanted him to be. That was the first thing everyone saw. The second thing was that he knew it. His posture was perfect. His smile was practiced. His eyes, however, kept shifting toward the doorway, as if searching for one person. Madeleine heard a whispered exchange behind a column. "Where is Monsieur Claret?" "He was summoned. He is not found." "That is impossible. The prince cannot begin without him." "Perhaps he is indisposed." "Indisposed?" A soft laugh. "That man is never indisposed when there is payment." Madeleine walked on, placing a glass into a waiting hand. Then another, and another. The servants were a quiet river along the edges of the room, never stopping, never speaking. But the center of the room started to tighten. A man with a thin mustache and a jewel at his cravat spoke in careful French. "Your Highness, we are honored by your presence. Shall we proceed to the matter that brings us together?" The prince's smile held. "Of course. I am at your service. France values—" He paused, and Madeleine saw it, the smallest fracture. His gaze flicked toward the door again. Someone said too softly, "No translator." Someone else replied, "He speaks French." He must answer in theirs. The prince lifted his chin. "Gentlemen, I propose we begin with our mutual commitments in a spirit of—" A voice cut in, pleasant and sharp, not French, English. "Our mutual commitments, Your Highness," the man said, as though offering kindness. "Yes, how fortunate. Then perhaps we may clarify the guarantees." Madeleine knew that word. Guarantees. It sounded simple. It was never simple. The Englishman's tone was courteous, but his eyes were not. He was testing. He wanted to see whether the young prince would flinch. The prince answered in English. His accent was elegant. His vocabulary was dangerous. "We offer full assurance," he said, and then he reached for a word that did not belong in his mouth yet. "And we expect your obedience as agreed." Madeleine froze in the middle of a step. Obedience. The Englishman's smile did not change, but the warmth behind it vanished. A few nearby diplomats, who understood English, tilted their heads. A French noblewoman fanned herself faster, sensing the shift without understanding the words. Madeleine's pulse struck once, hard. He meant compliance, cooperation, adherence, not obedience. Obedience was what masters demanded of servants, not what one sovereign demanded of another. The Englishman leaned in a fraction, still smiling. "Obedience, Your Highness." The prince's jaw tightened. He had already spoken. The word was already in the room. To correct himself too quickly would show weakness. To insist would be insult. Madeleine's tray felt suddenly heavy. Her throat went dry. "Do not speak," she told herself. "Do not exist." But the room narrowed around that one word, and she could almost hear the consequences unfolding like a paper fan. A whisper here, a letter there, a rumor that the Prince of France's ally spoke like a boy playing at power. Her lips moved before she made the choice. "Compliance," she breathed, barely sound at all. "Adherence." The prince's eyes flicked toward the sound, straight to her. It was like being caught with a stolen jewel. He turned back at once, raising his glass, as if he had only paused to choose elegance. "Forgive me," he said smoothly in English. "I speak of your adherence to what we shall agree together. Cooperation in the highest sense, nothing more." The Englishman's eyes narrowed. Then slowly, his smile returned to its previous shape. "Ah," he said, "of course, cooperation." The tension released, not fully, but enough that breathing became possible again. Madeleine forced her feet to move. She placed a glass into a hand that did not look at her. She stepped away, trying to vanish again. But she could feel the prince's gaze, like a hand on her shoulder. Another ambassador spoke, this time in German. Madeleine understood the words immediately, and she hated herself for it. "We must be certain," the German said, "that the railway concession will not be delayed by internal changes." The prince answered in French too quickly. "There will be no delays." The German ambassador replied in German again, his tone light. "Then we may put it in writing as you have said." The prince's mouth tightened. He had not understood that he had been asked for a legal assurance, not a polite statement. A murmur rose. "Does His Highness understand?" Someone whispered in French. "He is young," someone else replied, "and alone." Madeleine's fingers curled under the tray. Alone. That was the word that mattered. He stood surrounded by people and yet utterly alone, because language had placed a wall between him and half the room. And there was supposed to be a translator. Where was he? The answer came in fragments as servants brushed past one another near the side doors. "He was paid to disappear," a footman muttered under his breath, thinking no one was listening. "By whom?" another breathed. "Do not ask," the first snapped. "Do you want to be dismissed?" Madeleine kept walking. The next question came in Italian. The prince attempted an answer in French, and the Italian laughed lightly as if amused, but the amusement carried a blade. Madeleine's stomach twisted. She had seen men fall from grace for less. A single misplaced phrase could become a story told in salons for years. A man with a salt-and-pepper beard spoke in Russian, addressing another envoy, not the prince. The words slid through Madeleine's mind with painful clarity. He said, "He does not understand. He is a child wearing a crown that is not yet his." Madeleine's breath caught. Not a child. Not really. But that was how the world would paint him, if it suited their needs. The prince lifted his glass again. His smile did not falter, but Madeleine saw a sheen of sweat at his temple. He continued, he tried, he guessed. He was brave. He was also being cornered. Madeleine wanted to look away. Instead, she looked down, and in that downward glance, she saw a nobleman's shoes pivot toward her, just slightly, as if he had noticed the direction of the prince's gaze. She moved faster. A servant's life was a chain of errands, and she clung to that chain with both hands. Tea, wine, more tea, a plate carried away. She did not pause. She did not think. And still the words kept reaching her, because words were everywhere. English again, softer now, spoken by a woman with a high voice. "Your Highness, if I may be direct, our concern is not your goodwill. It is your understanding." The prince chuckled, a sound meant to charm. "Madame, I assure you I understand precisely." Madeleine nearly winced. The woman's French was flawless. Her meaning was not gentle. She had offered him a way to admit difficulty without humiliation. He had refused. Pride was a fine thing until it became a trap. The woman turned to someone beside her and said in English, not quite low enough, "He is determined to drown rather than ask for a hand." Madeleine's tray tilted slightly. She corrected it at once. No one noticed. She was grateful. Across the room, a tall man in ceremonial dress stepped forward. His voice was French, formal. "Your Highness, may I present Ambassador Volkov?" The Russian ambassador inclined his head, then spoke in French, but with a careful slant. as though he enjoyed making the language bend. "The honor is ours," Volkov said. "We have heard much of your readiness." Madeleine felt the bite in that last word. Readiness. It sounded like a compliment. It was a test. The prince replied, "I am prepared to serve my country with diligence." Volkov's smile was almost kind. Then he shifted into Russian, casually, like a man changing gloves. "Then speak to me as we will speak when papers are signed," he said in Russian. "Or must I address your minister instead?" Madeleine's heart lurched. The room held its breath, though only a few understood what had been said. Those few watched the prince like hawks. Prince Louis stared for a fraction of a second too long. Then he responded in French, smoothly, as if he had not heard the shift at all. "Monsieur l'ambassadeur, we may speak in French for now. It is the language of diplomacy, is it not?" Volkov's eyes gleamed. For now, a single phrase. A promise of later. A warning wrapped in politeness. Madeleine felt a coldness settle in her chest. This was becoming dangerous, not in the way that drew blood, but in the way that stole reputations and toppled futures. A young lady in pale silk leaned toward her companion and whispered, "He is being toyed with." Her companion replied, "It is cruel, cruel." Madeleine swallowed. Cruelty at court rarely looked like cruelty. It looked like amusement, like concern, like etiquette. It looked like tonight. She moved to the sideboard to refill a decanter. Her hands were steady again. She focused on the simple act, the measurable act. Pour, straighten, step back. A voice beside her murmured, "You corrected him." Madeleine did not look. "Monsieur?" It was a man's voice, low and controlled. Not a servant's voice. She stiffened. "I saw your lips move," the voice continued. And then His Highness corrected himself. Madeleine kept her eyes on the decanter. "I do not know what you mean." A pause. Then the voice said, "Look at me." Madeleine's hands went still. She turned, very slowly, as one did when summoned by someone above one's station. Prince Louis stood a step away, close enough that if anyone noticed, they would notice too much. His expression was calm, but his eyes were urgent. "You," he said softly. "You spoke." Madeleine lowered her gaze. "Your Highness, I did not—" "You did." His tone was not accusing, it was pleading, disguised as command. "What word did you give me?" Madeleine's throat tightened. Around them, the reception continued, but in her mind it fell away. She heard only the blood in her ears. "Compliance," she whispered. "Compliance," he repeated, tasting it, "and you knew it at once." "Your Highness," she began, but she did not know what she was going to say. "Forgive me. It was not her place. I did not mean to. Meaning did not matter." He leaned in slightly, his voice lower still. "Where is Monsieur Claret?" "I do not know," she said, and it was true. He stared at her as if trying to decide whether truth could come from a servant's mouth. Then he asked the question that made her spine go rigid. "How many languages do you speak?" Madeleine's breath caught. Her eyes flicked up before she could stop them. His gaze was direct. There was no mockery in it, only pressure. "I speak French," she said carefully, "as any maid must." "That is not what I asked." "My mother." She stopped. She could not bring her mother into this. Mothers were fragile things. A name could be used against them, even after death. Prince Louis watched her struggle with a kind of impatience that was not unkind. "Will you deny it?" he asked. "Here in this room with ambassadors waiting to catch me in my own ignorance." Madeleine felt heat rise behind her eyes, anger and fear braided together. She wanted to say, "Then do not stand alone. Find your minister. Find a proper translator. Do not pull a maid into your embarrassment." Instead, she said, "Your Highness, if I answer you, you will not forget it." His mouth tightened. "I cannot afford to forget anything tonight." Madeleine's fingers pressed into her palm. "Some words are dangerous." "All words are dangerous," he replied. "That is why I need someone who understands them." He glanced past her shoulder, toward the center of the room where Volkov stood speaking with a French official, smiling as if he had all the time in the world. Then Louis looked back at Madeleine. "Come with me," he said. Her body went cold. "Your Highness, I cannot leave my duties." "You will," he said very softly, "because I am commanding you." Command. The word struck like a bell. Madeleine's lips parted. She wanted to protest. She wanted to say that if she went with him, she would be seen. If she was seen, she would be discussed. If she was discussed, she would be destroyed in the polite way the court destroyed people. But the prince was not asking. He was not cruel, but he was desperate, and desperation turned even gentle men into forces that could crush. He stepped closer, not touching her, but narrowing the world around her with his presence. "You have already spoken," he said. "You are already part of this." Madeleine's heart pounded. A footman passed behind them, and Madeleine felt his curiosity like a prickle. Prince Louis kept his voice low, but his authority carried through even a whisper. "If you save me again, I will remember you as the one who saved me. If you refuse, I will remember you as the one who let me fall. Do you understand?" It was unfair. It was also the truth of power. Madeleine swallowed. "Where would your highness have me go?" "To the antechamber," he said, "behind the eastern doors. There is a small salon. We will speak there." "We." The word sounded intimate in a way it should not. She dipped her head. "As you wish." He turned at once, moving through the crowd with the ease of a man born to it. People made space. People bowed. People smiled and pretended not to watch too closely. Madeleine followed with her tray, because a maid with a tray was invisible, even when she was walking behind a prince. They passed a cluster of courtiers. Madeleine heard a whispered remark in French, soft and sharp. "Why is he looking at the servants?" Another voice replied, "Perhaps he seeks someone who will not laugh at him." Madeleine's cheeks burned. She kept her gaze on the floor. Prince Louis did not slow. At the eastern doors, 2 guards stood. They recognized him and opened the doors at once, as if he had been expected. Inside, the antechamber was quieter, but not empty. A few officials lingered near a table with papers. A clerk looked up, startled, then bowed quickly. Prince Louis said, "Leave us." The clerk hesitated. "Your Highness, the minister requested—" "I said leave us." The clerk obeyed immediately, gathering papers with shaking hands and retreating. The door shut. Madeleine stood alone with him. For a moment neither of them spoke. The silence felt improper. Prince Louis turned, and the mask of public charm fell away. He looked younger now, not childish, but weary. "You saved me from an insult," he said. "Tell me plainly. Can you translate?" Madeleine's throat tightened. She kept her eyes lowered. "Your Highness, I am a maid. I have eyes," he said. "I saw what happened. I heard a word," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Anyone could—" "No," he cut in, controlled but firm. "Not anyone, and not like that." Madeleine's fingers tightened around the edge of her tray. "If your Highness wishes a translator, there are men trained for it." "Where are they?" he demanded, then softened at once, catching himself. "Where is the man I was promised?" "I do not know," she repeated. He paced once, then stopped. "Do you understand English?" "Yes," she admitted, because denial had become useless. "German?" "Yes." He stared at her. "Italian?" "Yes." "Russian?" Madeleine hesitated. "Too long." His eyes sharpened. "Russian?" "Yes," she whispered. For a heartbeat, Louis said nothing. He looked at her the way one looked at an unexpected document that changed everything. "How?" he asked. Madeleine's mouth went dry. "By listening. That is not enough. It was for me," she said, and she hated that her voice trembled. "Servants hear everything. We hear, and we forget. That is how we remain employed." His gaze shifted, thoughtful, and something in his expression changed, like a door opening to a room he had never entered. "And how many?" he asked again, quieter. "How many languages?" Madeleine closed her eyes for half a breath, then opened them. "8, she said, and the word felt like a confession. He drew in a slow breath. 8. Madeleine waited for disbelief, for mockery, for anger. Instead, he said, "Tell me the others." She stared at the tray as if it could save her. "Spanish," she said. "Arabic. Turkish." His eyebrows lifted. "Turkish." "Yes." He let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but it held no amusement. It held relief. Then his face tightened again. "You must help me," he said. Madeleine's stomach turned. "Your Highness, if I do this—" "You will be paid," he said quickly, then stopped, as if realizing how that sounded. "No, not only that. You will be protected." "Protected?" The palace had taught Madeleine that protection was a word often used right before someone was sacrificed. She lifted her eyes at last. Protected by whom? His gaze did not flinch. By me. She wanted to believe him. She truly did. But belief was expensive. Your Highness, she said, you are the heir. Even you must answer to the court. His jaw tightened. Then I will answer. Madeleine's heart beat hard. They will say you are weak. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. They already say it. They just use different words. She swallowed. He looked at her tray. Put that down. Madeleine did not move at once. I am not dismissing you, he added more gently. I need you to speak to me, not serve me. The distinction struck her with a strange ache. Slowly she moved to a side table and set the tray down. The metal made a soft sound against the wood, too loud in the quiet room. Prince Louis exhaled, then spoke with urgency. Ambassador Volkov will request a private discussion within the hour. He will shift languages to test me. I cannot let him see me stumble. Madeleine kept her voice careful. Then do not answer in his language. Keep to French. He will interpret that as avoidance, Louis said, as weakness. He already hinted at it. Madeleine's mind moved quickly, faster than fear wanted to allow. Then you must acknowledge the shift without yielding to it. You must say politely that French will serve both parties in the interest of clarity. Louis watched her, and for the first time his expression showed something like awe. You speak as if you have stood in these rooms all your life, he said. Madeleine's lips pressed together. I have. Just not where you stand. His gaze softened for a fraction of a second, then hardened again with necessity. What else? He demanded. Tell me what they are doing. Madeleine hesitated. It was dangerous to reveal how much she understood of intent, not just words. Louis read her hesitation. If you are afraid of me, say so. Madeleine's throat tightened. I am afraid of the palace. He nodded once, as if that was the only honest answer. Then he said, very quietly, So am I. The admission startled her more than any command. Outside the door, the reception continued. A faint swell of laughter drifted through. A distant clink of glass. Inside, the air was tight with the kind of truth that did not belong between a prince and a maid. Louis spoke again, controlled. You will translate for me tonight. Madeleine forced herself to keep breathing. If I do, I will be seen. Yes, he said, and talked about. Yes, and harmed, she said, the word slipping out before she could soften it. His eyes held hers. Not if I prevent it. Can you? She asked, and heard the audacity in her own voice. He did not pretend. I do not know. But I will try. Try. Another dangerous word. But it was less dangerous than promises spoken for show. A knock sounded at the door. Prince Louis turned sharply. Who is it? A voice answered from the other side. Your Highness, Ambassador Volkov requests a brief exchange. Louis's shoulders tightened. Madeleine's pulse spiked. Louis looked at her. Now, he said, almost under his breath, now you must help me. Madeleine swallowed. Tell him to enter, and let me stand slightly behind you. Not too close. Louis blinked. Why? Because if I stand at your shoulder, they will say I am your equal, she said. If I stand too far, they will say you are ashamed. Slightly behind is acceptable. He stared for a heartbeat, then nodded. You know the dance. She did. Too well. Louis moved to the center of the small salon. He lifted his chin. Let him enter. The door opened. Ambassador Volkov stepped in with 2 attendants. He bowed with perfect form. Your Highness, he said in French. His gaze flicked to Madeleine behind Louis. It lingered. I hope I do not intrude. You do not, Louis replied. We are always pleased to speak with you. Volkov's eyes glittered. Always. Louis did not react. He only smiled, controlled. Volkov began in French smoothly. We admire your commitment to stability. It is the quality of true leadership. Stability is built by agreements honored, Louis replied. Volkov nodded. Indeed. And agreements are built by understanding. Would you indulge me in a brief exchange in my language, so I may be certain of our mutual clarity? The trap was laid with flowers. Louis's smile held. He glanced just once toward Madeleine. She felt the moment as a tightening string. She leaned forward a fraction and whispered so softly it was barely air, "Refuse with honor, offer respect, do not apologize." Louis answered in French, as if he had not heard anything. "Monsieur l'ambassadeur, I have great respect for your language and your nation. Tonight, for accuracy and courtesy, let us keep to French so there is no chance of misunderstanding." Volkov's expression did not change, but something sharpened behind his eyes. "A wise concern," he said in French. Then, with an ease meant to display dominance, he switched into Russian anyway. "Or do you fear that misunderstanding is already your companion?" Madeleine's heart lurched. That sentence was designed to sting. Louis's gaze flicked again, quick. Madeleine breathed the response, even quieter than before. "Answer in French. Say you fear only dishonor." Louis's voice remained calm, and he answered in French. "I fear only dishonor, monsieur, and dishonor is born from careless words. I will not be careless with you." Volkov's lips curved. "Well said." He continued in French now, as if granting a favor. "Then let us speak of timelines." "We are eager," Louis replied, and Madeleine listened to both the words and the hidden angles. Volkov pressed gently, always politely, always with the expectation that a young prince would over-promise. Madeleine whispered small corrections. "Do not say immediately. Say, without delay, within reason." Louis repeated them as if they were his own phrasing. It worked. Volkov's questions grew narrower. Then Volkov's gaze slid toward Madeleine again, and this time it did not glide past. It landed. "Your household runs with great efficiency," Volkov remarked in French. "Even your servants seem as well trained." Louis' smile tightened. "We value discipline." "And education," Volkov added lightly. Madeleine felt the blood drain from her face. Louis answered carefully, "Education is valuable in all stations." Volkov's eyes gleamed. How progressive. The word sounded like a compliment and an accusation at once. Volkov bowed. "I will not keep you longer, Your Highness. We look forward to tomorrow's discussions." "We look forward as well," Louis said. Volkov withdrew with his attendants, leaving the air behind him slightly colder than before. As soon as the door shut, Louis turned to Madeleine, his composure cracking. "He did it," he breathed. "He switched on purpose." "Yes," Madeleine said. "He wanted me to stumble." "Yes," Louis stared at her. "And you saved me again." Madeleine's hands were damp with sweat she had not noticed. "I guided you." "You spoke." He stepped closer, his voice urgent. "You must stay near me for the remainder of the reception." Madeleine's stomach clenched. "Your Highness, people will see." "They already have," he said, then softened, as if hearing his own harshness. "I know what I am asking, I do, but I cannot face them without a voice that does not betray me." Madeleine's throat tightened. "You have your own voice. It betrays me when it pretends to know what it does not," he said, and there was honesty in it that unsettled her. A second knock came, lighter, a different voice. "Your Highness, the Duc de Voren requests you return to the salon. The envoys are waiting." Louis exhaled. "Of course they are." He looked at Madeleine again. "Come." Madeleine picked up her tray because it was the only shield she had. The weight steadied her, as if it could anchor her back into the safe invisibility of service. Louis opened the door. He stepped out first and she followed, head slightly bowed, tray held at proper height. They moved through the corridor toward the sound of the reception, and with each step the palace seemed to sharpen around her, as if the walls themselves were paying attention. A pair of ladies passed, their voices bright. "Did you see?" one whispered. "A maid behind him," the other replied. "How odd." A man laughed softly. "Perhaps His Highness has discovered the value of silence." Madeleine kept walking. Prince Louis did not look at anyone. His face was composed again, but Madeleine knew the effort it cost. They approached the doorway to the salon, and Louis paused just for a heartbeat. His hand lifted slightly, not touching her, but hovering near the edge of her sleeve. It was not an embrace, not even a gesture that could be called affectionate. It was a warning, "Stay close." Madeleine nodded once. They entered. The room's noise swelled around them like water. Faces turned, smiles formed, eyes measured. Louis took his place at the center again, and Madeleine positioned herself slightly behind him, as instructed by her own understanding of survival. Duc de Voren approached at once, his expression smooth. "Your Highness," he murmured in French, glancing at Madeleine with a flicker of surprise quickly hidden. "Everything is prepared. We may begin the introductions for tomorrow's sessions." Louis replied, equally smooth. "We will." Voren's gaze flicked to Madeleine again, colder now. "May I ask what this is?" Louis's smile was polite. "An efficiency." Voren's lips tightened for the smallest moment. "I see." He turned away, but not before Madeleine saw the calculation in his eyes. The next introduction began, and Madeleine did what she had always done. She listened. She listened to English, German, Italian. She listened to Spanish, threaded through laughter. She listened to Russian, spoken as if French ears could not hear it. And then she heard something else, not a language, a sound that made her skin prickle, a soft intake of breath behind her, as if someone had just recognized a melody from childhood. Madeleine kept her gaze lowered, but she felt the presence near the edge of the crowd, just beyond the reach of the candlelight. A voice, low and controlled, spoke in perfect Turkish, close enough that only someone meant to hear it would understand. "That accent," the voice said. "It is hers." Madeleine did not turn her head when she heard the Turkish. If she turned, she would confirm it. If she confirmed it, she would be pulled into a conversation she could not survive. So she kept her gaze lowered, her hands steady on the tray, and she pretended the words had not been spoken at all. Prince Louis continued speaking to a German envoy, his tone light, his posture perfect. Only Madeleine, standing slightly behind him, noticed the smallest change in his breathing when he sensed her stiffness. "Your Highness," the German said in French, "we admire your confidence. Tomorrow, then, we will be precise." "We will," Louis replied. "Precision is respect." A polite circle of laughter followed. Madeleine heard Russian murmurs behind it. She heard Italian syllables, soft as silk. She heard English restraint. And in the middle of it she felt eyes on her, not curiosity, recognition. A man's voice murmured again in Turkish, a shade closer, as though he had shifted position to test whether she would react. "She learned it properly," the voice said. "Not from books alone." Madeleine's throat tightened. She did not swallow. Even swallowing felt too loud. Prince Louis lifted his glass, smiled, ended the exchange, and finally used the natural movement of the crowd to angle himself half a step closer to her. Without looking at her, he said in French, almost without moving his lips, "Are you unwell?" "No, Your Highness," Madeleine answered the same way, her mouth barely forming the words. "Someone spoke," he said. "Yes." "Do you know who?" "No, that was a lie." She knew enough to be frightened. It was not the language that frightened her. It was the idea that someone at court could place her by ear, like a coin recognized by its ring. Louis's voice lowered further. "After this set of introductions, you will come with me again." Madeleine's fingers pressed into the edge of the tray. "People will notice." "They already are," he replied. "Let them. I will not lose tomorrow because I refuse to be seen learning." Learning. It sounded noble. It sounded almost kind. Madeleine did not trust it yet. The rest of the reception passed in careful steps. Louis did not ask her to whisper more than was necessary. When someone shifted languages, he kept to French with deliberate calm. When someone tried to corner him with a foreign phrase, he smiled as if he had all the time in the world, and answered in the language of diplomacy, not pride. But once, as they stood near a marble column, Ambassador Volkov glanced toward Madeleine again and said in French, "Your Highness appears to have found a most attentive silence." Louis's smile did not move. "I have found that attentive silence is often wiser than eager noise." Volkov's eyes narrowed slightly. Then he bowed, satisfied that he had drawn blood without leaving a mark. Madeleine held her tray like a shield. When the last guests began to drift into smaller circles, Louis moved toward the eastern doors again. Duc de Voran intercepted him, smooth as polished wood. "Your Highness." "A moment." Louis stopped. "Of course." Voran's gaze flicked to Madeleine with a measured chill. "We have prepared a meeting for tomorrow morning, a preliminary exchange. Your schedule is full." Louis's tone remained courteous. "I am aware." Voran lowered his voice. "Then you cannot afford distractions." Madeleine felt the word strike her, though it was not aimed at her directly. Louis replied equally low, "It is not a distraction if it keeps me from speaking foolishly." Voran smiled. "There are trained men for that." Louis's smile sharpened. And yet tonight there were not. Voron's eyes did not blink. Temporary inconveniences occur. And temporary inconveniences, Louis said, can become permanent humiliations if they are convenient to the wrong person. A pause. Voron's expression remained polite, but something hard settled behind it. Of course, Your Highness, he murmured. We will remedy it. Louis turned slightly. Madeleine will attend the morning meeting. Madeleine's stomach dropped. Voron's brows lifted, just a touch. A maid. A voice, Louis corrected. Voron's smile did not reach his eyes. As you wish. His gaze slid away, but not before Madeleine felt it, like the brush of a cold glove across her cheek. Louis moved again, and Madeleine followed because she had no choice. In the corridor away from the crowd, Louis finally spoke normally. Tomorrow, they will press harder. Madeleine's voice came out quiet. They will press because they smelled weakness. He nodded once. And because someone removed my translator. Madeleine did not answer. Louis stopped beside a tall window. Tell me the truth. Who was speaking Turkish? Madeleine's breath caught. I did not see, but you understood. Yes. He watched her face, and she realized he was learning to read what people hid. It was a prince's skill, and it was arriving late. Were they threatening you? He asked. No, she said, then forced honesty. Not yet. Louis's jaw tightened. That is not comforting. It is reality, Madeleine replied. He held her gaze for a heartbeat longer than was proper. Then he looked away first, as if he realized the weight of looking at her like that. You will go back to your quarters, he said. Sleep if you can. In the morning report to the small council room, not the grand salon. Madeleine hesitated. Your Highness, if I appear there, your officials will object. I know, he replied. Let them. Then, after a pause, he added, and if anyone speaks to you tonight, you will tell me. Madeleine's mouth tightened. If anyone speaks to me, Your Highness, it will be to remind me of my place. Then tell me that too, Louis said. He left her in the corridor with an odd sensation in her chest, like a door had been opened, and she did not know whether it led to safety or a cliff. Madeleine returned to the servants' wing. The corridors narrowed. The air changed. The palace's grandeur ended abruptly where it no longer mattered. In the small room where maids hung their aprons and washed their hands, two girls whispered and fell silent when Madeleine entered. One of them, Lucy, stared at her with round eyes. Was that you? Madeleine kept her voice even. Was what me? Behind him, Lucy hissed. Behind the prince. Madeleine took off her apron slowly. I was serving, Lucy scoffed. Serving words, perhaps. Another maid, older with sharp cheekbones, shook her head. You should not be seen near them. That is how people vanish. Madeleine's fingers tightened around the cloth. People do not vanish. The older maid gave a thin smile. Not in stories. In palaces they do. Now hush. Walls, listen. Madeleine said nothing else. She washed her hands, folded her apron, and went to her small sleeping space with a single candle and too many thoughts. She did not sleep much. Morning arrived with the sound of footsteps and bells, and the quiet urgency that meant important men were hungry for agreements. Madeleine dressed in her plain uniform and pinned her hair with care. Care was armor. In the corridor outside the servants' wing, a young footman stood waiting, eyes down. Madeleine, he asked. Yes. His Highness requests you. No, please, no explanation. A command delivered in a servant's tone. Madeleine followed. They did not lead her through the main halls. They led her through side passages, back stairs, corridors lined with closed doors. The palace had a secret bloodstream, and she had lived inside it. Today she traveled it toward the heart. When they reached the small council room, the footman stopped and opened the door. Madeleine stepped inside. Prince Louis stood near a table covered with papers. 3 men were seated already. One was Duc de Voron. Another wore the pin of the foreign ministry. The third, thin and watchful, held a pen as if it were a weapon of its own sort. No weapons were present, of course. No steel, no threat that could be pointed. Only paper and power. Louis glanced at Madeleine and nodded once, a signal meant to steady her. You are on time. Madeleine curtsied. Your Highness. Voron's eyes moved over her, as if she were a stain on the room. Is this necessary? Louis took his chair. Yes. The foreign ministry man cleared his throat. Your Highness, the envoys will arrive within minutes. This is only a preliminary exchange to establish the tone. Louis's voice was calm. Then let the tone be clear. The thin man with the pen spoke without looking up. And discreet. Louis's gaze flicked to him. Discreet, yes, but not secret. Madeleine stood behind Louis, slightly to the side. She kept her hands clasped, her posture steady. A knock came. The door opened. 2 envoys entered, the Englishman from the previous night and an Italian diplomat with an easy smile. They bowed. Louis rose, greeted them, and gestured toward the chairs. When they sat, the Englishman's gaze slid toward Madeleine at once. He said in English, pleasantly, I see you have found assistance. Louis answered in English carefully, I have found clarity. Madeleine's pulse jumped. He was speaking English again. He should not be. But then Madeleine understood. He was choosing to do it this time, on his own terms, to show he could, or at least to show he was not afraid. The Englishman smiled. Splendid. Shall we begin? Louis looked at Madeleine without turning his head. A silent question. Madeleine's mouth felt dry. She leaned in just enough to be heard by him, and not by the room. Let them speak, she whispered in French. Answer in French, make it about courtesy. Louis nodded once, almost imperceptibly. He addressed them in French. Gentlemen, we shall proceed in French for precision. Should you wish any phrasing clarified, my interpreter will provide it. Interpreter. The word hit Madeleine like a new garment placed on her shoulders in front of witnesses. The Italian diplomat lifted his brows. Your interpreter is your maid? The foreign ministry man shifted in his chair, uncomfortable. Voren's expression remained smooth, but the air tightened. Louis did not blink. She is my interpreter. The Englishman's smile sharpened, amused. How modern, Louis replied evenly. How practical. The Italian diplomat chuckled lightly. Practical is rarely fashionable. Louis's voice remained calm. I am not concerned with fashion. Madeleine felt every pair of eyes on her. She did not move. She did not flinch. She waited for words to become her work. The Englishman began, still in English. We would like reassurance regarding the railway concession's continuity. Madeleine turned the sentence into French immediately, choosing words that carried weight without sounding defensive. Louis answered in French, The concession will proceed within the agreed terms. The Italian diplomat spoke in Italian, smooth and fast. Madeleine caught it easily. He asked for timelines, but he wrapped it in praise as if handing a gift. Madeleine translated into French, with the praise intact and the question sharpened. Louis responded, We will not delay without cause. The Englishman's gaze flicked to Madeleine again. Then he spoke in French this time, as if showing he could. Then we may confirm that no internal changes will alter the concession. It sounded simple. Madeleine felt the hook. No internal changes, no exceptions, no adjustments. A promise that could trap the crown if anything shifted. Madeleine's mind moved quickly. She leaned in and whispered, Say you will honor the spirit and the letter of the agreement, within the law, with due notice for any amendments. Do not say no changes. Louis's eyes narrowed slightly as he listened. Then he said in French calmly, We will honor the agreement in both spirit and letter. Should any legal adjustments become necessary, they will be addressed through the proper channels with full notice and mutual consent. The Englishman's smile tightened. He had been blocked without being insulted. The Italian diplomat laughed softly. You are careful, Your Highness. I am responsible, Louis replied. Voren's fingers tapped once on the table, a controlled irritation. Madeleine caught it. The foreign ministry man looked down, as if pretending not to hear the tension. The Englishman said in English again, Then we should include a clause regarding arbitration in the event of dispute. Madeleine translated. Arbitration. Dispute. The tone remained polite, but the intention was to position them as superior if disagreement arose. Madeleine leaned in, whispering, Ask where arbitration occurs. They want home advantage. Louis replied in French, Arbitration is reasonable. We should determine a neutral location agreeable to all. The Englishman's expression shifted again. A brief crack of annoyance smoothed over instantly. Naturally. The Italian diplomat spoke in Italian, his tone almost teasing. "And what of the tariff exceptions?" Madeleine translated. Louis answered. They went on like that for nearly an hour. Each time the envoys tried to tuck a blade into a bouquet of compliments, Madeleine saw it and guided Louis away from it with the smallest whispered phrases. She did not show triumph. She did not smile. She simply did her work, as if she were cleaning a floor that everyone pretended was not dirty. When the envoys finally rose to leave, the Englishman bowed, his gaze lingering on Madeleine. He said in French, "Your Highness has found an interesting resource." Louis replied, "I have found honesty." The Italian diplomat tilted his head toward Madeleine. "Signorina, you have a talent." Madeleine did not answer. She could not answer. Not in that room. Not like that. Louis said for her, "She serves the crown." The Italian diplomat smiled, as do we all in our ways. They left. When the door shut, the room exhaled. Then it tightened again. Voren leaned back in his chair, hands folded. "That was effective." Louis's tone was guarded. "Yes." The foreign ministry man cleared his throat. "Your Highness, we cannot deny the meeting went well." The thin clerk spoke at last, pen poised. "But the presence of a servant in negotiations will be remarked upon." Louis's eyes hardened. "Let it be remarked upon." Voren's voice remained smooth, almost gentle. "Your Highness, you are young. Youth is forgiven many things, but it is not forgiven the appearance of dependency." Louis's jaw clenched. "I am dependent on clarity, not on a person." Voren's gaze slid to Madeleine. "And yet, the person stands behind you." Madeleine kept her posture steady. She did not lower her head further. She refused to shrink more than she already had to. Voren continued, "It is dangerous for her, and inconvenient for you." Louis's voice was colder now. "You are concerned for her safety?" "I am concerned for the crown's dignity," Voren replied, "and I am concerned for the palace. Servants who listen too much become complicated." Madeleine felt the words like a hand closing around her throat, gently, without leaving bruises. Louis's eyes narrowed. "She listens because she has ears." Voren smiled faintly. "She speaks because she has ambition." Madeleine's stomach twisted. She wanted to speak, to deny it, to defend herself. But any defense would sound like argument. Any argument would sound like presumption. Louis stood. "The meeting is over." The foreign ministry man rose quickly. "Yes, Your Highness." The clerk gathered his papers and escaped. Only Voren remained seated, watching Louis with a stillness that felt like a lesson. Louis did not look away. "Find a competent translator," he ordered. Voren's smile returned. "Of course. Immediately." "And until you do," Louis said, "she stays." Voren's gaze flicked to Madeleine once more. "As you wish." He rose slowly and bowed, then walked out with perfect composure. The door shut. Madeleine realized she had been holding her breath. Louis turned to her. For a moment his expression softened. "You did well." Madeleine's voice came out rough. "I did what you asked." "You did more," he said. "You kept them from trapping me." Madeleine stared at the floor. "That is what words do, they trap." Louis hesitated, then said, "Look at me." She lifted her gaze reluctantly. His eyes were tired, but steady. "I heard what Voren said, about ambition." Madeleine swallowed. "He does not need truth to make a story." "No," Louis agreed, "but I do." Madeleine's hands tightened. "Your Highness, I do not want anything from you." "That is not believable," Louis said, not unkindly. "Everyone wants something." Madeleine felt heat rise in her chest. Not anger, not exactly. Something sharper. "I want to remain alive in my position," she said quietly. "I want to finish my duties without becoming a topic for noble mouths." Louis's gaze held hers. "And what if I offer you more than survival?" Madeleine's pulse jumped. "More is dangerous." Louis's mouth tightened as if he wanted to say something else, something softer, but he caught it. Instead, he nodded. "Then I offer you this. You will not be punished for helping me. I will see to it." Madeleine did not know how to respond. Promises from princes were like coins tossed into fountains. They made a sound. They made a wish. They did not guarantee anything. Louis added, "Go back to your duties, but stay near. I will call for you again before the next session." Madeleine curtsied. "Yes, Your Highness." As she left the small council room, she felt the corridors chill again. The palace did not care who did well. It cared who belonged. When she returned to the servants' wing, the looks began immediately. Lucy stared as if Madeleine had grown a second head. The older maid with sharp cheekbones muttered, "You have climbed too high." "I did not climb," Madeleine said. "I was pulled." "You still rose," the older maid replied. Madeleine went to her assigned tasks, because tasks were safer than words. She polished, she carried. She served luncheon in a smaller dining room, where lesser officials ate quickly and spoke louder than they should. As she passed, she heard fragments. A maid in negotiations, an embarrassment, a scandal. She must be a spy. Madeleine kept her face blank. In the afternoon, Lady Eleanor appeared in the corridor outside a salon, surrounded by two friends. They were dressed for tea and judgment. Madeleine tried to pass without drawing attention. Lady Eleanor's voice stopped her like a silk cord. "You," she said sweetly. "Madeleine, is it?" Madeleine curtsied. "Yes, my lady." Lady Eleanor stepped closer, her smile delicate. "Tell me, do you always accompany His Highness now, or only when he cannot find proper company?" Madeleine kept her eyes lowered. "I go where I am ordered." Lady Eleanor chuckled. "Ordered. How noble, how convenient. One might almost think you have become indispensable." One of her friends sighed theatrically. "Indispensable maids. What will they invent next?" Madeleine said nothing. Lady Eleanor circled a fraction, just enough to inspect her like a vase. "You speak many languages, they say." Madeleine's chest tightened. "I speak as needed in my work." "Your work?" Lady Eleanor repeated, tasting the words. "How fascinating. In my household, my maids speak only when addressed. It keeps them from imagining themselves above their station." Madeleine forced her breath to remain even. "Yes, my lady." Lady Eleanor's smile sharpened. "And yet you imagine yourself useful to treaties." "I imagine nothing," Madeleine said quietly. Lady Eleanor leaned in slightly. "Be careful, little maid. Palaces do not forgive unusual creatures. They admire them briefly, like circus acts. Then they tire." Madeleine's hands curled under her apron. "Yes, my lady." Lady Eleanor straightened. "Run along, before someone mistakes you for a guest." Her friends laughed softly. Madeleine walked away, her cheeks burning, her throat tight. She did not cry. Tears were another kind of speech. Near the kitchen entrance, the housekeeper, Madame Fournier, grabbed Madeleine's arm with brisk fingers. "Come," Madame Fournier hissed. "Now." Madeleine's stomach sank. "Madame." "No questions," Madame Fournier snapped. "Do you want me to look foolish? Come." She pulled Madeleine into a small storage room, shut the door, and turned with a face stern enough to crack stone. "What have you done?" Madame Fournier demanded. Madeleine's voice was steady by effort alone. "Nothing, madame. Do not lie to me," Madame Fournier said. "I know when the upper floors are disturbed. I know when the minister's men begin to sniff around my servants." Madeleine's heart pounded. They were going to ask questions anyway. Madame Fournier narrowed her eyes. "There is talk." Madeleine swallowed. "There is always talk." Madame Fournier's gaze dropped to Madeleine's apron. "What do you carry?" Madeleine's fingers tightened automatically. "Nothing that matters." Madame Fournier's mouth pressed into a thin line. "Show me." Madeleine's pulse spiked. "Madame, it is only—" "Show me," Madame Fournier repeated, and this time there was fear beneath the authority. "If they find it first, they will say I hid it." Madeleine hesitated, then reached into the inner pocket and pulled out the small, worn phrase book she kept wrapped in cloth. Madame Fournier stared as if Madeleine had produced a jewel. "You foolish girl," she whispered. "You kept this in the palace?" Madeleine's throat tightened. "I kept it on me. It is mine. It is evidence," Madame Fournier snapped. "Evidence that you were not raised as you claim. Evidence that you have been listening." Madeleine's fingers clenched around the book. "I have always listened." Madame Fournier took a breath, then held out her hand. "Give it to me." Madeleine's eyes widened. "No." Madame Fournier's expression softened a fraction. "Madeleine, I am not your enemy, but you are walking into danger with your pockets full of proof." Madeleine's voice shook. "If I give it away, I have nothing." Madame Fournier's eyes narrowed. "You have your position." "My position is a door that can be closed," Madeleine replied. Madame Fournier looked at her for a long moment, then sighed sharply. "Hide it better. If it is found, I will not be able to shield you." Madeleine swallowed. "Thank you, madame." Madame Fournier waved her away, irritated and worried at once. "Go and keep your head down. Whatever the prince promised you, remember this palace eats promises for breakfast." Madeleine slipped the phrasebook back into her pocket, deeper this time, closer to her skin. She left the storage room with her heart thundering. She spent the next hours working, trying to become invisible again. But invisibility, once broken, was not easily repaired. When she carried a tray through a passage near the ministerial offices, two men in dark coats turned their heads. One murmured, "That is her." The other replied, "Small, ordinary, which makes it worse." Madeleine kept walking, her steps measured. Late in the day, a footman found her again. "Madeleine," he said quickly, "His Highness requests you." Her stomach flipped. "Now?" "Yes, in the antechamber." She followed, feeling eyes on her along the way. The palace seemed to have grown narrower, as if it wanted to press her into the walls. When she entered the antechamber, Louis stood alone this time, hands on the back of a chair. He turned when she came in, relief crossing his face before he masked it. "You are here," he said. "I was summoned," Madeleine replied. He nodded, then hesitated. "They are preparing a larger meeting tomorrow. Voren insists he has found a translator." Madeleine's pulse jumped. "He has?" Louis's mouth tightened. "He claims he has." "And you do not believe him?" Madeleine said. Louis exhaled. "I believe Voren will do what benefits Voren." Madeleine's fingers tightened under her apron. "Then why keep me near at all, Your Highness?" Louis's gaze held hers. "Because I trust what you did, and because I do not trust what they will do to you if they decide you are a problem." Madeleine's throat tightened. "They already have decided." Louis's jaw clenched. "What happened today?" Madeleine hesitated. She could still hear Lady Eleanor's laughter. She could still feel Madame Fournier's panic. "It is nothing," she said. Louis's eyes narrowed. "It is not nothing." Madeleine's voice came out quiet, bitter despite her efforts. "Your Highness, I was reminded that a maid who speaks becomes a spectacle, and spectacles are not protected. They are displayed." Louis's expression tightened with something that looked like anger, not at her. "Who?" he asked. Madeleine swallowed. "It does not matter." "It matters to me," Louis said, and the words landed strangely, too intimate for their stations. Madeleine looked away first. "Lady Eleanor." Louis's mouth tightened. "Of course." He paced once, then stopped. "And Voren?" Madeleine hesitated. "His men were near the servants' wing." Louis's eyes sharpened. "Searching." Madeleine's pulse jumped. "Not openly." Louis's jaw clenched. "They will." Madeleine forced herself to meet his gaze again. "Your Highness, I cannot win against them." Louis's voice lowered. "Then you will not stand alone." A silence fell between them, heavy with the things neither of them could say without making them dangerous. Then Louis spoke, controlled again. "Tomorrow, you will come early. Before anyone arrives, we will go over the key points. You will tell me what phrases to avoid." Madeleine nodded slowly. "Yes, Your Highness." Louis hesitated, then said, "And tonight, you will keep your door locked." Madeleine's breath caught. "Why would I—" "Because," Louis said, and his voice hardened with an authority that sounded like fear wearing a crown. "Someone in the reception spoke Turkish about you as if they knew you." Madeleine went cold. "You heard?" she whispered. Louis nodded once. "I did not understand the words, but I understood the attention." "You stiffened." Madeleine's throat tightened. "I did not see who it was." Louis stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If you remember anything, tell me, even if it seems small." Madeleine swallowed. "Yes." He held her gaze for a moment, then stepped back, as if reminding himself of distance. "You may go," he said. Madeleine curtsied and left, her heart pounding harder than it had in the morning. Back in the servants' wing, the day's heat had cooled into a brittle quiet. The other maids spoke less when Madeleine entered. Some looked away. Some looked at her as if she were contagious. Madeleine went to the scullery to help with the evening cleaning. The work was loud enough to drown whispers, and she needed that. She scrubbed until her hands ached, then dried trays, then stacked plates. She kept her head down. She tried to be only hands, but even hands could be watched. At one point, Lucy slid close and whispered, "There are men asking about you." Madeline kept wiping a tray. "What men?" Lucy's eyes darted. "Not servants, men with papers." Madeline's stomach turned. "Go away, Lucy." Lucy hesitated. "Are you in trouble?" Madeline's voice stayed flat. "Everyone is in trouble." "Go." Lucy retreated, frightened. Madeline lifted a stack of polished silver and carried it toward the pantry. The corridor there was dimmer, quieter, a place where footsteps echoed. Halfway down, she heard her name spoken behind her, soft as dust. "Madeleine." She did not stop. She kept walking. The voice did not follow. Instead, something brushed her tray as she passed a narrow table used for deliveries. A folded piece of paper slid onto the silver with practiced ease, like a card slipped into a sleeve. Madeline's breath caught. Her hands tightened to keep the tray from shaking. She reached the pantry door, pushed it open with her shoulder, and stepped inside. Only then did she look down. The paper was folded neatly. Her name was written on the outside in careful script, not in French, in Russian. And it read, "Madeleine." Madeleine stared at the Russian letters until they blurred. The pantry smelled of soap and starch. The silver on her tray gleamed with a calm that felt insulting. Everything around her looked ordinary, and her name, written in Russian, made it all feel false. She set the tray down with care, as if noise could summon someone. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the paper. The handwriting was elegant, unhurried, certain. "You do not belong where they have placed you. You never did." Madeline's throat tightened. She read it again, slower, as if she could change the meaning by refusing to believe it. Below the first line, another sentence waited. "If you wish to remain safe, stop lending your voice to the prince. Your gift has already been noticed." Madeline's breath caught. Gift, not skill, not labor. Gift, as if it were something stolen or unnatural. She read on. "Tonight, you were recognized by your Turkish. Tomorrow you will be tested with something you are meant to fail." And then a final line, almost polite, "Burn this." Madeline's fingers closed hard around the paper. Her first instinct was to crumple it, to tear it, to throw it into the sink and drown it like a spider. But paper did not drown easily, and fear did not vanish with water. She looked toward the pantry door. Silence. No footsteps. No voices. She pressed the note to her palm, as if she could crush the ink into dust. Who would write to her in Russian? Who would dare? Someone inside the palace. Someone who knew her name, not just her face. Someone who knew which language would strike deepest. She whispered, barely sound, "I have no one." And yet someone had found her anyway. A memory rose without permission. A man's voice speaking Russian in a corridor years ago, when she had been carrying linens and thought she was invisible. She had not understood every word then. She had understood enough to know it was not meant for her. Now it was meant for her. Madeline folded the note again, smaller this time, and slipped it into her pocket against the worn phrasebook she had hidden deeper than before. Her heart hammered as she picked up the tray again and left the pantry. She moved through the corridor with her face blank, her steps steady, as if she had received nothing more than a list of chores. In the scullery, Lucy was waiting, eyes wide. "Did someone speak to you?" Lucy whispered. Madeline placed the tray down and began arranging the silver as if she did not care. "Go away." Lucy lingered. "You look pale." "I am tired." Lucy lowered her voice further. "They say the Duke's men went through the servants' passage. They asked Madame Fournier for names." Madeline's stomach turned. "Lucy." "Yes?" "Do not say my name aloud like that," Madeline said, and hated how sharp it sounded. Lucy flinched. "I only meant—" "I know what you meant," Madeline replied, softer. "Go." Lucy finally retreated, casting frightened glances over her shoulder. Madeline kept working until her hands ached, until the world narrowed to plates and cloth and the simple comfort of repetition. But the note burned against her skin like a coal. When the kitchen quieted and the other maids drifted away, Madeline slipped toward the small hearth used for heating water. A pot simmered, barely steaming. No one watched. She pulled the Russian note from her pocket. Burn this. Her fingers hesitated. If she burned it, she lost proof. If she kept it, she carried danger. Her eyes stung. She blinked hard and forced herself to decide. She held the paper over the hearth's flame. The edge curled, then blackened. She watched her name disappear first. Madeleine swallowed as the words turned to ash. When the last corner crumbled, she rubbed the soot into her palm, then washed her hands until the water ran cold and her skin felt raw. Proof gone. Fear remained. That night, she locked her door, as Prince Louis had ordered. The lock was small, the kind that kept out honest mistakes, not determined hands. She lay on her narrow bed and tried to breathe. Her thoughts chased each other. Stop lending your voice to the prince. Tomorrow, you will be tested with something you are meant to fail. Madeleine closed her eyes. She did not sleep. In the grey of early morning, a soft knock came at her door. Madeleine sat up at once, heart racing. "Madeleine," Madame Fournier whispered from the corridor. "Get up, quickly." Madeleine opened the door a crack. Madame Fournier's face looked pinched, angry and worried at once. "What is it?" Madeleine asked. "His Highness's men are in the servants' wing," Madame Fournier hissed. "Not to take you. Not yet. To watch." Madeleine's stomach dropped. "Watch for what?" Madame Fournier's eyes narrowed. "For mistakes, for panic, for anything that gives them a reason." Madeleine's mouth went dry. "Who is they?" Madame Fournier's lips tightened. "Do not make me speak names. You know whose men move like that." "Voren." Madame Fournier seized Madeleine's wrist. "Listen. Keep your voice gentle today. Keep your mouth closed unless His Highness directly commands it. And if anyone asks you anything about your past, you heard me? You know nothing." Madeleine nodded, throat tight. Madame Fournier released her with a sharp sigh. "Go, and keep your hands steady." Madeleine dressed quickly, pinned her hair, smoothed her uniform. She looked like every other maid again, but she no longer felt like one. A footman met her at the end of the corridor. "His Highness requests you," he said. Madeleine followed, forcing herself not to glance toward the shadows. She felt eyes anyway. They led her to a larger room today, not the small council room. This chamber had a long table, more chairs, heavier curtains, the kind of room where decisions became paper. As Madeleine entered, she saw Prince Louis standing with 2 French officials and Duc de Voran. Louis looked up at once. Relief crossed his face, then steadied into composure. "You are here," he said. "Yes, Your Highness." Voran's gaze slid over her with calm disdain. "Of course she is." Louis ignored him. "Stand where you did yesterday." Madeleine moved slightly behind Louis, her hands clasped, her posture careful. One of the officials, Monsieur Delacroix from the Foreign Ministry, cleared his throat. "Your Highness, today's session concerns the draft language. There will be written clauses presented in multiple tongues." Louis nodded. "Then we will be even more careful." Voran smiled faintly. "Indeed. Careful." Madeleine felt the word land like a warning. A knock came. The door opened, and more men entered. The Englishman, the Italian diplomat, and a German envoy with a face like carved stone. Behind them, a secretary carried folders. They bowed, took seats. The Englishman's gaze flicked to Madeleine with a slight lift of his brows. "Your Highness," he said in French, "I see your interpreter attends again." "She does," Louis replied. The German envoy said in German, voice clipped, "Let us begin. We have schedules." Madeleine translated smoothly into French. Louis answered in French, "We will respect your time by respecting our words." The Italian diplomat smiled. A charming principle. A secretary placed documents on the table. Thick paper, neat columns, French on one side, other languages on the other. Madeleine's eyes moved over the lines as they were distributed. She told herself not to search for traps, but traps were what she had learned to see. Delacroix said, "Clause 1. The concession is granted for the agreed term." The Englishman added in French, "with renewal conditions specified." The German envoy murmured something in German about enforcement. Madeleine translated. Louis listened, nodded, responded. They moved clause by clause. The pace was measured, the tone polite. Too polite. Madeleine felt it like a strange calm before a storm that was not weather. Then she saw the phrase, It sat in the middle of a paragraph, dressed in ordinary language, almost boring. In French it read, sous réserve d'une interprétation raisonnable, under the reservation of a reasonable interpretation. Reasonable. Madeleine's stomach tightened, because in the parallel column, the English version offered the phrase, subject to reasonable interpretation by the granting authority. By the granting authority. That was different. Dangerous. It gave one side the right to decide what was reasonable, and that right could become a leash. Madeleine's fingers curled under her sleeve. Delacroix began reading aloud. Clause 7 addresses the handling of disputes and interpretive questions. The Englishman smiled mildly. A necessary clause. The German envoy said in German, interpretation will be decisive. Madeleine translated, then felt the room's eyes settle on her, as if they all expected her to carry this part. Delacroix looked to Louis. Your Highness? Louis nodded. Proceed, Delacroix continued. In the event of ambiguity, the parties agree to... He paused and looked at Madeleine, as if passing her the burden. Madeleine leaned forward slightly, speaking in a low voice meant for Louis. Your Highness, the English column adds, by the granting authority. That shifts power. Louis's eyes sharpened. He did not speak at once. Voren's gaze flicked to Madeleine, then to the paper. Is there an issue? Louis replied calmly. Madeleine believes there may be a discrepancy. The Englishman's smile held. A discrepancy? Madeleine's mouth went dry. She had not been addressed directly, but the room's attention pressed on her. Delacroix frowned at the page. The French seems standard. Madeleine's heart pounded. Standard. That word again. She forced her voice steady, speaking to Louis, not to the envoys. The French is vague enough to be harmless. The English makes it specific. It makes your office the judge of reason, or theirs, depending on who is called the granting authority. The Italian diplomat leaned in, curious. This is fascinating. The German envoy's eyes narrowed. Is the maid correcting the document? Voren's tone remained pleasant. She is... enthusiastic. Madeleine felt heat rise in her cheeks. Louis's voice sharpened slightly. She is precise. The Englishman spread his hands. If there is confusion, we can clarify. Madeleine knew that was the moment. Clarify meant bargain. Bargain meant pressure. She glanced down again, scanning the French. The clause could be rephrased, it could be made mutual. It could be neutral. If they allowed it. Louis leaned slightly toward her. What do you advise? Madeleine swallowed. Change it to say interpretation must be agreed by both parties, and if not, referred to neutral arbitration. The Englishman's smile tightened. Neutral arbitration again. You are quite fond of it, Your Highness. Louis held his composure. Fond of fairness. The German envoy spoke in German, impatient. Stop debating. Use the standard wording. It exists for a reason. Madeleine translated. Delacroix hesitated. The standard wording would indeed be acceptable. Madeleine felt a cold drop in her chest. Acceptable to whom? Voren leaned forward, fingers steepled. Your Highness, we cannot rewrite every familiar phrase because a servant feels uneasy. Madeleine's breath caught. Louis's jaw tightened. She is not merely a servant in this room. Voren's eyes glinted. In this room, Your Highness, she is whatever you declare. In the world outside, she is a maid who will be blamed if anything goes wrong. Madeleine went still. That was the truth hidden in civility. The Englishman watched with polite interest, as if enjoying the palace's internal struggle. Louis looked at the clause again. His gaze flicked to Delacroix. Monsieur Delacroix, is this phrasing truly standard in both columns? Delacroix hesitated. It is common, Your Highness. Common, not identical. The German envoy tapped the table once. We are not here for theatre. The Italian diplomat chuckled softly. Everything is theatre. Madeleine's hands tightened. She wanted to insist. She wanted to say, this is the test. Tomorrow, you will be tested with something you are meant to fail. She had burned the note, but the warning had remained. Louis held her gaze for a heartbeat. Then his shoulders rose and fell with a controlled breath, and he made a decision that made Madeleine's stomach drop. Very well, Louis said in French. We will accept the standard wording. Madeleine felt her pulse stumble. Voren's smile softened with satisfaction. Wise. Delacroix nodded, relieved. Excellent. The Englishman smiled. Splendid. Madeleine's throat tightened so hard it hurt. She leaned in, whispering urgently, Your Highness. Louis did not look at her. He did not answer. He had chosen obedience to the room over her warning, and she understood why. He could not afford to appear led by a maid in front of these men. He could not afford the gossip, the laughter, the weakening of his position, but the cost of his pride would land on her. The secretary made a note on the draft. The clause remained. The meeting continued. Clause 8, Clause 9. Madeleine translated, answered when asked, kept her voice steady. She did not show her fear, but she felt the trap tighten. When the envoys finally rose and left, bows were exchanged, hands shaken, smiles fixed. As soon as the door closed, the room's air changed. Delacroix rubbed his forehead. That went smoothly. Louis's voice was clipped. Yes. Voren rose with a satisfied ease. You see, Your Highness? It is simpler when we follow established forms. Louis did not respond. Madeleine stood still, her posture correct, her heart pounding. Voren turned toward her with a smile that was almost kind. Madeleine, you performed admirably for someone in your position. Madeleine kept her gaze lowered. Thank you, Monsieur le Duc. Voren's voice softened. However, you must understand that diplomacy is not a parlor game for clever girls. It is a serious matter. Words have consequences. Madeleine's hands clenched under her sleeves. Yes, Monsieur le Duc. Voren tilted his head. And because words have consequences, it is best that only trained professionals speak them. Louis's voice cut in, low and dangerous. Enough. Voren's smile remained. As you wish. He bowed to Louis and walked out with unhurried grace. Delacroix rose quickly. Your Highness, I must return to my office. There are copies to prepare. Louis dismissed him with a nod. Soon, only Louis and Madeleine remained. The silence snapped like a thread. Madeleine spoke first, unable to stop herself. Your Highness, you should not have accepted that clause. Louis's face tightened. I know. Her breath caught. You know? He turned toward her, and his expression was not proud now. It was strained. I saw the discrepancy, he said quietly. I felt the room closing. Voren wanted me to resist so he could say I was being led, so I chose the path that kept them calm and put me in danger, Madeleine whispered. Louis flinched slightly, as if the words struck where he did not want them. I did not mean to, he said. You did it anyway, she replied, and her voice shook despite her effort. Louis's jaw clenched. Do you think I do not understand what they will say? Madeleine's throat tightened. They will not say it about you, they will say it about me. He looked away, paced once, then stopped. Tell me exactly why the clause is dangerous. Explain it as if I were a child. Madeleine swallowed hard. Because the phrase reasonable interpretation by the granting authority can be used later to claim that your office or theirs may interpret any ambiguity to its advantage. It makes reason a mask for control. Louis nodded slowly. And I accepted it. Yes, she said, barely audible. Louis's voice dropped. Because Voren wanted you to look like you alarmed the room over nothing. He wanted you to appear foolish. Madeleine's chest tightened. Then he succeeded. No, Louis said sharply. He succeeded in making me choose wrongly. Madeleine's eyes stung. She blinked hard. Your Highness, if you want me to be your voice, you cannot silence me when it matters most. His gaze snapped back to hers. I did not silence you. You ignored me, she said. A pause. Louis's shoulders sank a fraction, the weight of it visible now that no one watched. You are right, he said quietly, and I am sorry. The apology startled her more than any command. Madeleine's throat tightened further. Sorry does not protect me. No, Louis agreed, voice low, but I intend to protect you. Madeleine let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh, but held no humor. How? Louis's eyes hardened. By finding proof. Proof of what? She asked, then regretted the question at once. Proof invited investigation. Investigation invited exposure. Louis replied, proof that Voren has been manipulating this from the beginning. Proof that the translator did not simply vanish. Madeleine's pulse jumped. Your Highness, you cannot accuse the Duke without evidence. I know, Louis said. That is why I will find it. Madeleine swallowed. He will deny it. Then I will find something he cannot deny, Louis replied, and there was a dangerous steadiness in his tone, not violent, but determined in a way she had not heard from him before. Madeleine hesitated, then said quietly, Someone wrote to me. Louis's eyes sharpened. Who? I do not know, she admitted. A note was slipped onto my tray. Louis stepped closer. What did it say? Madeleine's mouth went dry. The paper was ash now. Only memory remained, and memory could be questioned. It was in Russian, she said. Louis's expression tightened. Russian, yes. What did it say? He asked again. Madeleine hesitated. It warned me to stop helping you. Louis's jaw clenched. Because you were recognized. Madeleine's breath caught. How did you... I saw the attention, he said. I told you. Madeleine nodded, throat tight. The note said I would be tested with something I was meant to fail. Louis's eyes narrowed. And then this clause appears. Madeleine swallowed. Yes. Louis went still, as if a pattern had finally aligned in his mind. Did you keep the note? He asked. Madeleine's stomach dropped. No. His gaze sharpened. Why not? Because it had my name, she whispered. In Russian. If it was found, I could have used it, Louis said, frustration rising. I burned it, Madeleine replied, and the words came out sharper than she intended, because I have lived my life being told that paper is more dangerous than truth. Louis held her gaze. The frustration softened, replaced by something like understanding. You did what you thought you had to, he said quietly. Then he added, next time, bring it to me. Madeleine's throat tightened. There may not be a next time. There will be, Louis said, and the certainty in his voice made her heart ache in a way she did not want to name. He stepped back, regaining control. Go. Do not speak of this to anyone. Madeleine nodded. Yes, Your Highness. And Madeleine, he said. She paused. Louis's voice softened. I should not have let them make you small in that room. Madeleine's breath caught. She answered carefully, I have been small in many rooms, Your Highness. His gaze held hers, intense, not in mine. Madeleine could not speak to that. She curtsied and left before her face betrayed her. She returned to her duties with her mind spinning. The servants' corridors were louder today, full of whispers that stopped when she passed. In the afternoon she was sent to deliver linens near the ministerial wing. The task felt ordinary. It never was. As she walked, she saw two men standing near a doorway, speaking softly. One wore Voron's colors, the other held a keyring. Madeleine lowered her gaze and passed without pausing, but she heard just enough. Tonight, the man with the keys murmured, the cabinet will be opened. And the record? The other asked. The record is already corrected, the key man replied. Madeleine's breath caught, but she kept walking. Record. Corrected. She delivered the linens with hands that wanted to shake and returned, forcing her face into blankness. When evening came, a footman found her again. Madeleine, he said, breathless. His Highness requests you. Her stomach clenched. Where? The antechamber, he replied. Quickly. Madeleine followed, heart racing. When she entered, Louis was not alone. Delacroix stood with him, face pale. Delacroix spoke first, low. Your Highness, I have reviewed the draft. The clause is unusual. Not illegal, but unusual. It appears it was introduced through an administrative addendum. Louis's eyes were cold. Introduced by whom? Delacroix swallowed. The ministerial office. Under the Duke's oversight. Louis turned toward Madeleine. You were right. Madeleine's throat tightened. That does not help me. It will, Louis said. Delacroix hesitated, then added, There is another matter. The Duke has requested a background inquiry on your interpreter, Your Highness. He claims it is necessary for security. Madeleine went cold. Louis's jaw clenched. He requested it. Delacroix nodded. Formally. Papers are already moving. Madeleine's voice came out small despite her effort. They will find nothing. Delacroix's expression flickered with pity. They will find whatever they decide to call something. Louis's eyes hardened further. Enough. Leave us. Delacroix bowed quickly and left. The door shut. Madeleine stood very still. Your Highness, I told you. Louis stepped closer. You did. And I did not listen soon enough. Madeleine swallowed. What will you do? Louis's voice was low and controlled. Voren keeps his records in the ministerial cabinet. He thinks no one touches them without permission. Madeleine's pulse spiked. Your Highness, you cannot... I can, Louis said. I am the heir, and he serves the crown. Madeleine's throat tightened. And if he says you violated protocol? Louis's eyes met hers. Then I will say I acted to protect it. A silence. Madeleine's breath shook. And what about me? Louis hesitated. If I find what I need, I can stop this inquiry before it becomes a weapon. Before it becomes a weapon. Words again. Always words. Madeleine forced herself to speak. Then do not go alone. Louis's gaze narrowed. You want to come? No, Madeleine whispered. But if you go alone and are caught, he will twist it. If I am there, he will twist it too. Either way, he twists. Louis let out a slow breath. Stay here. If anyone asks, you never left. Madeleine's eyes widened. Your Highness, I am not asking you to lie for me, Louis said, and his voice softened. I am asking you to stay safe. Madeleine's throat tightened. Safe. The palace did not know the meaning of that word. Louis turned toward the door, then paused, as if something occurred to him. He looked back at her. Madeleine, if I find something, and it changes what you thought you knew about yourself, Madeleine's stomach clenched. Do not say such things. Louis's gaze held hers. Do you know where you were born? Madeleine froze. Why? Answer me, he said gently. Madeleine swallowed. I was told a village near Lyon. Told, Louis repeated quietly. Madeleine's hands trembled. She clasped them tighter. It is all I have. Louis nodded once. Then I will not take it from you without reason. He left. Madeleine stood alone in the antechamber, heart pounding, listening to the faint sounds beyond the door. She imagined Louis moving through corridors, using his title like a key. She imagined Voren's smooth smile turning sharp if he discovered what Louis was doing. Minutes passed, like hours. Madeleine paced once, then forced herself to stop. Pacing was noise. Noise drew attention. A servant passed in the corridor outside. Another. Voices murmured. Madeleine pressed her fingers to her palm and tried to breathe. Then at last, the door opened again. Louis stepped inside quickly and shut it behind him. His face was controlled, but his eyes were lit with a shock he could not hide. Your Highness, Madeleine whispered. Did you find... Louis crossed to her in 2 strides, lowered his voice. I found a ledger. Madeleine's stomach tightened. A ledger? Yes, he said. Personnel records, household assignments, notes. Madeleine's throat went dry. And? Louis swallowed, as if the words tasted wrong. And your name is in it? Madeleine went cold. Of course my name is in it, I work here. Louis shook his head once. Not like that. Madeleine's breath caught. What do you mean? Louis's voice dropped further. The entry is not simple. It is altered, as if someone corrected it after the fact. Madeleine's heart hammered. Corrected to what? Louis stared at her, and she saw something in his expression that frightened her more than Voren's disdain. He said, To hide you. Madeleine's mouth went dry. Hide me from whom? Louis's hand tightened on the edge of the table, knuckles whitening, though he did not raise his voice. From anyone who might ask why a maid has an education meant for someone else. Madeleine felt dizzy. Louis reached into his coat and pulled out a small slip of paper he had copied quickly, lines scrawled in haste. Madeleine stared at the ink. It was her name, spelled 2 different ways. One as she had always known it, the other with an extra surname, struck through. Her breath caught. That is not mine. Louis's eyes held hers. It was written, then crossed out, and beside it the note says, reassigned by ministerial order. Identity simplified. Madeleine's hands shook. Simplified. Louis nodded, voice tight. And the ink is newer than the page. In the dim cabinet, Louis stared at the amended entry beside her name. The ink newer than the page itself. Madeleine could not breathe until she forced herself to. Louis's words hung between them like a bell that would not stop ringing. To hide you. She stared at the copied lines in his hand. The crossed-out surname looked like a wound on the page. That is not my name. she whispered. Louis did not argue. He only said, "It was written as if it once was." Madeline's fingers rose, then stopped, as if touching the ink might make it true. Someone could have made a mistake. Louis's gaze stayed steady. Not with two spellings, not with a note that says identity simplified. Madeline swallowed hard. Simplified for what purpose? Louis exhaled. To make you easier to place, easier to control. Madeline's voice came out thin. I was placed in the servants' wing because I had nowhere else. And because someone decided you should stay there, Louis replied. She shook her head once, sharp, refusing. I remember my mother's hands. I remember her singing in French. I remember her telling me to keep quiet in halls like these. Louis's expression softened. You remember, love. That is not being questioned. Madeline's eyes stung. Everything feels questioned. Louis looked down at the paper again. The ink is newer than the page. Someone returned to your record later. Someone cared enough to rewrite you. Madeline's throat tightened. If they rewrote it, they can rewrite it again. They can make me anything. Louis's jaw clenched. Not if I stop them. She let out a breath that shook. Your Highness, you already tried to stop them, and they still slipped a clause into the draft. His eyes flashed with regret. And I will not repeat that error. Madeline stared at him, searching for the edge where his concern ended and his need began. He seemed to read the thought. You are not a tool, he said low, and I am tired of pretending I can afford to treat you like one. Madeline's lips parted, then closed again. She did not know how to answer a prince who spoke like that. Louis folded the paper carefully and placed it into a small envelope from the writing desk. I will not keep this where it can be stolen, he said. But I will not destroy it either. Madeline swallowed. What will you do with it? I will bring it to someone who can speak truth inside these walls, Louis replied. Madeline's heart lurched. The Duke will say it is false. Then we will not begin with the Duke, Louis said. We will begin with a man who is difficult to frighten and even harder to bribe. Madeline frowned slightly. Who? Louis hesitated only a moment. Father Armand? The chaplain. Madeline went cold all over. No. Louis blinked. Why? Because priests remember, she whispered. They remember what you say when you are young and afraid. They remember what you beg them not to repeat. Louis's voice softened. Do you know Father Armand? Madeleine stared at the floor. I have seen him. That is not an answer, Louis said gently. Madeline's hands clenched. Years ago, when I was smaller, when I first entered service, he asked me a question in Latin, as if it were a trick. Louis's brows lifted. And you answered? Madeline's mouth tightened. Yes. Louis studied her face. Then, he already knows you are not ordinary. Madeline's breath caught. No one is ordinary, Your Highness. They are simply permitted to be complicated. Louis's gaze held hers. Then, I will permit it. She almost laughed, because the word permit was so princely, so naive, and yet it landed like a door opening. Louis straightened. Come with me. Madeline's stomach tightened. To the chapel? Yes. And if someone sees me following you there, she whispered, they will make it a story. Louis's voice turned crisp. Let them make it a story about piety. Madeline's cheeks warmed despite herself. That is convenient. It is useful, he replied. There is a difference. He opened the door and stepped into the corridor. Madeline followed, keeping her eyes lowered, her steps quiet. They moved through the palace's calmer passages, away from the grand rooms where gossip gathered like perfume. Even so, they passed two attendants who paused a beat too long. Louis nodded to them. Good morning, Your Highness, they murmured, and their eyes flicked to Madeline and away again. Madeline's stomach tightened with every glance. When they reached the chapel door, Louis waited until it opened, then entered first. Madeline followed, feeling the hush of the place settle around her. The air was cooler. The silence was real, not merely performed. Father Armand stood near a side table, arranging papers with the care of a man who disliked mess. He looked up at once. His eyes went to Louis, then to Madeline. He did not smile. He did not frown. He simply said, Your Highness. Father, Louis replied, I require your discretion. Father Armand nodded once. You would not be here if you did not. Louis gestured slightly. "We must speak privately." Father Armand's gaze rested on Madeleine. "And the young woman will remain?" Louis answered without hesitation. "Yes." Madeleine's throat tightened. She wanted to disappear behind a pillar. Father Armand said calmly, "Then come. The sacristy is empty." They moved into a small adjoining room. Father Armand closed the door and turned, his expression unchanged. "What troubles the crown this morning?" he asked. Louis did not play with ceremony. He pulled the envelope from his coat and slid the paper across the table. "Her record," Louis said. "It has been altered." Father Armand's eyes lowered to the ink. He read without haste. The room felt like it held its breath. Madeleine watched his face, searching for a reaction that might ruin her. At last, Father Armand looked up. "Where did you find this?" he asked. "In a ministerial cabinet," Louis replied, "where it was not meant to be found." Father Armand's gaze sharpened slightly. "You opened a cabinet without permission." Louis met his eyes. "I am the heir, and someone is moving against the negotiations." Father Armand did not argue. He tapped the paper once with a finger. "This surname," he said quietly, "is not unfamiliar." Madeleine's knees weakened. She gripped the edge of the table without thinking. Louis leaned in. "You recognize it." "I recognize it," Father Armand said. Then he looked at Madeleine. "And I recognize you." Madeleine's breath caught. "You cannot." Father Armand's voice remained gentle, but firm. "You were 13 when you answered my Latin question. You were frightened afterward because you believed knowledge was a crime." Madeleine's mouth went dry. "It is, for some. Not in itself," Father Armand said. "Only when it threatens those who prefer ignorance." Louis's jaw tightened. "Father, tell me the truth. Who is she?" Madeleine flinched at the word who. Father Armand folded his hands. "Her name, as she has lived it, is Madeleine, and she has earned it by surviving." Louis's voice sharpened. "I did not ask poetry. I asked truth." Father Armand held Louis's gaze. "Truth is rarely tidy, Your Highness." Madeleine's voice shook. "Father, please." Father Armand's eyes softened slightly. "Child, you have nothing to be ashamed of." Madeleine swallowed. "You do not know what they will say." "I know exactly what they will say," Father Armand replied. "That is why I kept quiet when you were young." Louis frowned. "You kept quiet?" Father Armand nodded. "A woman came to me once, not to confess sin, to beg protection." Madeleine's heart lurched. "My mother." Father Armand did not deny it. "She was ill. She feared she would not live long enough to secure you." Madeleine's throat tightened until it hurt. "I remember her being tired," Father Armand continued, voice measured. "She told me she had served a man of learning, a diplomat who collected languages like others collect coins. He found amusement in teaching a clever child. Then he found respect. He ensured you could read, speak, understand." Louis's eyes narrowed. "A diplomat in France?" "Yes," Father Armand replied. "A man whose household moved through embassies. You heard languages the way other children hear lullabies." Madeleine's fingers trembled. "He was not my father." Father Armand looked at her steadily. "Your mother never claimed he was." Madeleine let out a breath that sounded like relief and grief together. Louis's shoulders eased slightly. "Then there is no connection between her and your bloodline," Father Armand said, as if he had heard the unspoken fear. "None." Madeleine's breath caught. She had not realized she needed that certainty said aloud until it was. Louis nodded once, grim. "Then why hide her?" Father Armand's expression hardened. "Because those who move documents do not hide what is harmless." Madeleine whispered, "They hid me because I listened." Father Armand's gaze turned to her. "They hid you because someone feared what you might prove." Louis leaned closer. "Father, did her mother give you anything? A letter? A record?" Father Armand hesitated for the first time. Madeleine's stomach dropped. "Father." Father Armand's eyes held hers. "I did not keep it as a treasure. I kept it as a shield." He moved to a small cabinet built into the sacristy wall, unlocked it with a plain key, and withdrew an envelope worn at the edges. He placed it on the table. Madeleine stared at it as if it might bite. Father Armand said, "Your mother wrote this the night before she died." Madeleine's throat tightened. "She wrote, she dictated," Father Armand corrected gently. I wrote it for her. Louis's voice was low. May we read it? Father Armand looked at Madeleine. It is hers, she decides. Madeleine's hands hovered over the envelope. She could not make herself touch it. I don't want to know, she whispered, and hated the trembling in her voice. If I know, I cannot pretend. Louis's tone softened. Madeleine, she looked at him, and his expression was not commanding now. It was careful. You deserve to know the truth about yourself, he said. And if the truth makes me a target, she replied, then what? Louis's jaw tightened. Then I will stand between you and the target. Madeleine's eyes stung. That is a brave thing to say. It is a necessary thing to do, Louis answered. Madeleine swallowed, then reached out and opened the envelope with fingers that did not feel like her own. The letter was short. Father Armand had written neatly, with the restraint of someone who knew words could both heal and harm. Madeleine read, My daughter's mind is not a sin. Do not let them punish her for it. Her name was given to hide her because men are kinder to servants they can ignore. She speaks what she has heard. She is not a spy. She is only hungry for understanding, because understanding kept her alive. Madeleine's vision blurred. She blinked hard. At the bottom, one line stood apart. If anyone claims she is dangerous, tell them this. She has never harmed anyone with her words. She has only prevented harm caused by others' pride. Madeleine pressed a hand to her mouth. The room spun. Louis's voice came softly. Madeleine. She shook her head, trying to find breath. She defended me, she whispered. Even in dying, Father Armand nodded. She loved you fiercely. Madeleine wiped her cheek quickly, angry at herself for crying where it could be seen. Louis's voice firmed. Father, will you support us? Father Armand's gaze turned to him. With truth, always. Then I need you to witness an inquiry, Louis said. Not a public trial, a private review, documents, addendums, the disappearance of my translator, the altered clause, the altered record. Father Armand's eyes narrowed. You suspect the Duke? Louis did not say the name at first, then he did. Voren. Madeleine stiffened. Father Armand's mouth tightened. He is skilled at appearing indispensable. Louis's expression went cold. He will learn what it is to be replaceable. Father Armand looked at Madeleine. Child, do you wish this? Madeleine's throat tightened. I wish to stop being hunted by whispers. Father Armand nodded once. Then we proceed. The inquiry began within hours, because Louis did not allow time for Voren to prepare a fresh story. In a small administrative chamber, with Delacroix present and Father Armand seated like a quiet anchor, Louis summoned Voren under the guise of a routine review. Madeleine stood just inside the doorway, not behind Louis this time, but to the side, where she could hear everything and be seen as little as possible. Voren entered with a smile that would have fooled a kinder world. Your Highness, he said, I am honored. What may I do? Louis gestured to a chair. Sit. Voren sat, still smiling. Of course. Delacroix cleared his throat. Monsieur le Duc, we are reviewing the draft addendum for Clause 7. Voren's smile did not shift. Ah, a necessary clause. Louis's voice was calm. Who introduced the addendum? Voren spread his hands. Standard practice. Clerks compile, officials approve. Did you approve it? Louis asked. Voren chuckled lightly. Your Highness, I approve dozens of minor revisions. It is my duty. Louis slid a paper across the table. This revision was not minor. Voren glanced down. It appears ordinary. Delacroix leaned forward, controlled. The French is ordinary. The English specifies interpretive authority in a way that shifts balance. Voren's eyes lifted. Then we adjust it. Louis's tone sharpened. Why was it introduced at all? Voren's smile softened, as if speaking to a child. To speed consensus. Envoys like familiar phrasing. Louis did not blink. Envoys like advantage. Voren's gaze flicked briefly toward Madeleine, then returned to Louis. You have become suspicious, Your Highness. I have become attentive, Louis replied. Father Armand spoke for the first time, voice quiet. Attentiveness is a virtue. Voren's smile tightened a fraction. Father Armand, how unexpected. Louis's eyes hardened. Not unexpected. Necessary. Voren's posture remained relaxed. Your Highness, if you wish to rewrite the clause, I will support it. Louis leaned slightly forward. We will rewrite it. But first, we will address another matter. He placed the copied slip from the ledger on the table. Voren glanced down, and for the first time his smile faltered just slightly, as if he had recognized his own handwriting's shape. Madeleine's heart hammered. Louis's voice stayed calm. This entry was altered. Voren looked back up. Household records are revised frequently. Names are corrected. Louis's gaze did not waver. This was not a correction. This was a simplification of identity. Voren's eyes cooled. Your Highness, you involve yourself in trivialities. Madeleine's breath caught at trivialities. Louis's tone sharpened. Nothing involving my negotiations is trivial. Voren's smile returned, but thinner. Then perhaps you should not rely on a maid for them. The words landed like a slap made of silk. Madeleine's fingers clenched. Louis's voice dropped, dangerous in its quiet. You will not speak of her with contempt in front of me. Voren's brows lifted. Contempt? I speak only of propriety. Father Armand's voice was calm. Propriety is often used as a cloak for fear. Voren turned his head slightly. Fear of what, Father? Of a maid with a talent? Hardly. Delacroix spoke, crisp. Monsieur le Duc, did you request a background inquiry into Madeleine? Voren smiled. Security requires it. Louis's eyes narrowed. Security or control? Voren's gaze held Louis's with practiced steadiness. Your Highness, you are being manipulated. A beat of silence. Louis leaned back slightly, as if letting the accusation hang where everyone could see it. Then he said, Yes. Voren's smile sharpened, pleased. Then you understand. Louis continued, voice even. I am being manipulated by those who remove my translator, insert favorable clauses for foreign comfort, and intimidate the one person preventing my humiliation. Voren's expression still. You accuse me of removing your translator. Louis did not raise his voice. Where is Monsieur Claret? Voren spread his hands. I do not manage the man's habits. Delacroix opened a folder and slid a note forward. Monsieur Claret received a payment yesterday afternoon from an intermediary associated with the Duke's office. He then left Paris without notice. Madeleine's breath caught. Voren's eyes flicked to the paper. An intermediary, he repeated, as if tasting the weakness. Not from me. Louis leaned forward. Your office's intermediary is your responsibility. Voren's smile returned faintly. Your Highness, you are under strain. You see plots where there are only administrative errors. Louis's gaze was ice. Then we will remove the errors. Voren's eyes narrowed. Remove them how? Louis's voice stayed polite, which somehow made it more final, by relieving you of your oversight of negotiations. The room went still. Madeleine's heart thundered. Voren's smile did not appear this time. You cannot be serious. I am, Louis said. You will be reassigned to provincial administration until the signing is complete. Delacroix will supervise drafts. Father Armand will witness procedural integrity. Voren's jaw tightened. Your Highness, such a reassignment will be discussed. It has already been decided, Louis replied. Voren's gaze burned with controlled fury. You will regret humiliating a man who has served you. Louis's tone did not change. You humiliated me in front of ambassadors. You will not do it again. Voren rose slowly. He bowed perfectly. As you command. Then his gaze flicked to Madeleine, and the look was not loud, not dramatic, but it promised inconvenience in every corridor. Madeleine held herself still. Louis spoke again, quiet and absolute. You will also withdraw the background inquiry. Immediately. Voren's smile returned, thin as paper. Of course. He turned and left the chamber with impeccable composure. When the door shut, Delacroix exhaled hard. Your Highness, that was bold, Louis replied. It was overdue. Father Armand's eyes moved to Madeleine. Are you well? Madeleine's voice came out small. I am still standing. Louis turned toward her. You will not be questioned again. Madeleine's throat tightened. You cannot stop questions. I can stop official permission to ask them, Louis said. Delacroix nodded. The inquiry is withdrawn. I will see to it, Father Armand added, and I will speak to Madame Fournier quietly. The servants must not be turned into a net. Madeleine blinked, surprised. You would do that? Father Armand's expression softened. Your mother asked me to protect you. I am late, but not unwilling. Louis's voice turned brisk. Father Delacroix, thank you. Leave us. They bowed and departed. Madeleine and Louis were alone again, and the silence felt different now, not a trap, not a punishment. A pause after a storm that had not broken into violence, only into truth. Louis stepped closer. I am sorry, he said. Madeleine's chest tightened. You already said that. I did not earn forgiveness by saying it, Louis replied. I must earn it by what I do next. Madeleine's fingers twisted together. And what will you do next? Louis moved to the writing desk and pulled a sheet of paper toward him. I will put your protection into ink. Madeleine's breath caught. A paper can be used against me. A paper can also defend you, Louis said and dipped the pen. This one will carry my seal. He wrote quickly, without flourish, as if refusing to turn her life into ornament. When he finished, he read aloud. Madeleine is appointed interpreter to the heir's office for the duration of the current negotiations. She is under my direct authority. No inquiry into her person may proceed without my consent. Any attempt to harass, dismiss, or intimidate her will be treated as interference with the Crown's work. Madeleine went still. Your Highness. Louis looked up. Is it enough? Madeleine's throat tightened. It is more than I have ever had. He folded the letter and pressed wax, then stamped it with a signet. The simple finality of it made her chest ache. He held it out to her. Keep it. Madeleine took it with hands that trembled. If someone sees this, then they will see you are protected, Louis said. Madeleine stared at the seal. And if they still whisper? Louis's voice softened. Then let them whisper. Whispers do not govern me. Madeleine swallowed. They govern everyone else. Louis hesitated, then said, Madeleine, look at me. She lifted her eyes. His expression was careful, as if he was approaching a door he had no right to open. When I first pulled you into that antechamber, he said, I was thinking of my crown, my pride, my fear. Madeleine did not interrupt. She could not. Louis continued, Then I watched you stand in rooms that wished to crush you politely, and you did not crumble. Madeleine's breath caught. I have crumbled. Not where it mattered, Louis said. You spoke truth with restraint. You corrected me without shaming me. You saved me even when I failed to shield you. Madeleine's throat tightened. For you did not ask for that. I did, Louis replied, by needing you. A silence. He exhaled slowly. I do not want to keep you at my side only as an instrument. Madeleine's pulse spiked. Your Highness. Louis lifted a hand slightly, then lowered it again, as if he remembered he had no right to touch her. I want you to have a future that is not built on hiding. Madeleine's voice shook. A future is a large word. Louis nodded. Then I will say it plainly, and you may refuse plainly. Madeleine held her breath. Louis met her eyes. When these negotiations end, I intend to ask for your hand. The room went very still. Madeleine's heart thundered so loudly she felt it in her throat. You cannot. I can, Louis said, steady. But I will not force you into it. I will not corner you with gratitude. Madeleine's mouth went dry. Why would you do that? Louis's gaze did not waver. Because I have come to admire you, because you make me better, because when you speak, I hear a kind of courage I was not raised to practice. Madeleine swallowed hard. And because it would silence whispers. Louis shook his head once. It would summon louder ones. Madeleine's breath caught, and a strange, almost helpless sound escaped her. Then why? Louis's voice softened. Because I do not want to lose you to the cruelty of convenience. Madeleine's eyes stung. She blinked quickly. You do not even know who I am. I know enough, Louis said. And I want to know the rest if you will allow it. Madeleine clutched the sealed letter to her chest, as if it could hold her together. If I say yes, I will be watched forever. Louis answered, If you say yes, you will be watched, but you will not be alone. Madeleine's breath shook. And if I say no? Louis's jaw tightened, but his voice remained gentle. Then you will still be appointed. You will still be paid. You will still be protected. And you will choose your own life. That, more than the proposal, made her eyes burn again. Madeleine whispered, No one offers choice to a maid. Louis replied, Then let me be the first. A quiet stretched between them. Madeleine's voice came out small. "I need time." Louis nodded at once, as if relieved she had not fled. "You will have it." Madeleine swallowed. "And you must not speak of this to anyone." "I will not," Louis promised. "Not until you tell me you are ready." Madeleine drew in a careful breath. "Tomorrow is the signing." Louis's expression sharpened with purpose again. "Yes." "And Voren?" she asked. "He will be gone before morning," Louis said. Reassigned politely. No spectacle. Madeleine's throat tightened. "He will hate me." Louis's eyes hardened. "He will not touch you." Madeleine's fingers tightened around the sealed letter. "People do not need to touch you to harm you." "I know," Louis said quietly. "That is why I am learning to watch where harm begins." Madeleine did not know what to do with the warmth that rose in her chest at those words. It felt dangerous. It felt like hope. Louis stepped back, giving her space again. "Go now. Rest if you can. Tomorrow you will stand beside me openly, not hidden behind a tray." Madeleine's breath caught. "Openly?" Louis nodded. "As interpreter. As appointed." Madeleine whispered. "They will stare," Louis answered. "Let them," Madeleine curtsied, because habit was stubborn. "Yes, Your Highness." Louis's voice softened at the last moment. "Madeleine." She paused. He looked at her with a steadiness that made her chest ache again. "Thank you for not leaving when fear gave you every excuse." Madeleine's throat tightened. "I did not stay out of bravery." Louis replied, "Then I will call it devotion to doing what is right." Madeleine could not answer. She left the chamber, her steps quiet, the sealed letter hidden against her heart. In the servants' corridor, the palace felt different, as if the walls had shifted slightly. People still whispered, doors still closed. But Madeleine carried something new now, not just paper. She carried a name that had been defended. She carried a choice that had been offered. And as she reached her small room and locked the door, she pressed her fingers against the wax seal and whispered, barely sound at all, "Tomorrow then." Madeleine woke before the bells. For a moment she forgot why her heart was already racing. Then she felt the wax seal in her pocket and remembered everything at once. She dressed in silence, hands careful, mind loud. Outside her door, the servants' corridor carried the hush of a palace, trying to pretend nothing had changed. Yet every pause in conversation, every quick glance, said the opposite. Lucy found her near the wash basins and grabbed her sleeve. "Madeleine," Lucy whispered. "They say you're going to stand with him today." Madeleine kept her voice low. "They say many things." Lucy's eyes shone with fear and awe. "Is it true?" Madeleine drew her sleeve gently back. "Do not ask me that in a corridor." Lucy swallowed. "Will they punish you?" Madeleine looked at her, and for once she did not soften the truth. "They will try." Lucy's face went pale. "Then why do it?" Madeleine's throat tightened. "Because if I step back now, they will learn they can push me anywhere they wish." Lucy blinked hard. "You're not afraid?" Madeleine almost smiled. "I am afraid enough to be careful." A footman appeared, breathless. "Madeleine, His Highness requests you." Now, she followed, the palace's secret passages swallowing her like a familiar dream. She kept her head down, but she felt the eyes anyway. They were everywhere today, some curious, some contemptuous, some hungry for scandal. When she reached the antechamber, Louis was already there, sleeves neat, expression composed in the way men learned when they were trained to carry a nation on their face. Delacroix stood with him, holding a folder. Father Armand sat quietly near the wall, hands folded, as if prayer and paperwork belonged together. Louis turned the moment Madeleine entered. His gaze held hers with a steadiness that made her stomach flutter and ache at the same time. "You came," he said. "I was summoned," she replied, then hated how small it sounded. Louis stepped closer. "No, you chose to come." Madeleine's breath caught. "Your Highness, today is not—" "Today is exactly when choice matters," he said gently. Delacroix cleared his throat, trying to remind the room it was still a room of duties. "Your Highness, the revised clause is prepared in all columns. The envoys have been notified." Louis nodded once. "Good." Father Armand's quiet voice followed. "And the reassignment order for the Duke has been delivered. He will not attend." Madeleine's shoulders loosened a fraction. Louis saw it. "No one will drag you into a trap today," he said. Madeleine's mouth went dry. You cannot promise that. Louis's eyes sharpened. Then I will promise what I can keep. If anyone tries, they will find me between you and their cruelty. Madeleine's pulse jumped. That is a bold position for a prince. Louis's mouth tightened, almost a smile. I am learning. Delacroix held out a small document. Your formal appointment, mademoiselle. Madeleine stared at it. The word mademoiselle sounded strange applied to her in that room. She did not reach for it. Louis took it instead, folded it, and placed it in his own inner pocket. She will not carry paper today, he said. Not while every hand wants to steal it. Delacroix blinked, then bowed. As you wish, Your Highness. Father Armand rose. The chapel is prepared if you need a quiet moment before the hall. Louis glanced at Madeleine. Do you want that? Madeleine's throat tightened. I want to breathe. Louis held out his hand, not touching her, simply offering direction. Then we will breathe. They went to the chapel for only a few minutes. Madeleine stood near the back, eyes on the floor, while Louis spoke to Father Armand in a low voice. I meant what I said, Louis murmured. But I will not speak it publicly unless she gives me her consent. Father Armand's reply was quiet. Then ask her plainly, not like a prince, like a man who understands what fear costs. Louis nodded, then turned toward Madeleine. Madeleine, he said. She lifted her gaze. He did not use her as a shadow now. He looked at her as if she were a person he could not afford to misunderstand. Before we go into that hall, he said, tell me what you need from me, so you can stand without trembling. Her voice came out rough. I need you to listen to me even when it makes you uncomfortable. I will, he said at once. I need you to speak of me with respect, she continued, even if others laugh. I will, Louis repeated, and there was no hesitation now. Madeleine swallowed. And I need you to understand that if you offer me a life beside you, it must not be a cage made of gold. Louis's eyes softened. Then it will be a door. Madeleine's breath caught. A door where I can walk away if I must. Louis's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed gentle. Yes. Father Armand watched them with something like approval, but he said nothing. Madeleine stared at Louis, trying to find deceit. She found none, only resolve and a kind of tenderness that made her chest hurt. She whispered, Then I will stand. Louis nodded once, as if he had received a vow. They entered the signing hall. Madeleine had been in grand rooms before, carrying trays and lowering her eyes. Today she entered without a tray. That alone felt like stepping into sunlight without permission. The envoys were already seated. The Englishman, composed and watchful. The Italian diplomat, smiling as if amused by the world. The German envoy, stern and exact. Ambassador Volkov, elegant and cold as a polished mirror. Lady Eleanor sat among the court observers, fan in hand, gaze bright with anticipation. When Louis entered, the room rose. When Madeleine stepped in behind him, a ripple went through the air like a breath drawn by too many throats at once. A murmur began and died quickly under the weight of etiquette. Louis walked to the head of the table. Madeleine took her place slightly behind and to the side, exactly as before, but this time she was not pretending to be invisible. She stood as appointed. Volkov's gaze landed on her immediately, and his lips curved with faint amusement. Lady Eleanor's fan fluttered faster. Delacroix sat near the documents ready to guide procedure. Father Armand stood quietly at the side, present not as decoration, but as witness. Louis began in French, voice calm. Gentlemen, we are here to conclude what we have begun. The Englishman nodded. We are pleased, Your Highness. The German envoy said in German, clipped. Then let us conclude. Madeleine translated smoothly, her voice steady enough that it surprised even her. Louis inclined his head. We will, the Italian diplomat smiled. And may it be remembered as wise. Volkov leaned back slightly and spoke in Russian, softly, as if tasting power. May it be remembered as profitable. Madeleine translated into French without a tremor. Not profitable, she rendered, but beneficial to all parties, keeping the tone diplomatic while preserving the meaning. Volkov's eyes narrowed. He had been understood. Good. Let him feel it, Madeleine thought. Let him know the palace has ears. Delacroix opened the folder and slid the first documents forward. Clause revisions have been prepared. Each column reflects identical meaning. The Englishman glanced down. I see the arbitration language is present. Louis replied. Neutral and mutually agreed. The German envoy grunted, approving despite himself. Madeleine watched the room's rhythm, the tiny movements that signaled resistance. Volkov's gaze flicked once toward a line, then away. Lady Eleanor leaned toward a companion, whispering something with a smile meant to cut. Madeleine forced her attention to the work. Words, always words. The Englishman began a final clarification in English, gentle and sharp. Your Highness, may we confirm that interpretive ambiguities will not be decided unilaterally? Madeleine translated into French, making the question as polite as it sounded. Louis answered in French, they will not. We will not bind ourselves to an imbalance. Volkov spoke in French now, smoothly. A mature statement. Louis nodded once. I have had excellent instruction. The room went still for half a breath. Some eyes slid to Madeleine. Louis did not look away from Volkov. He continued evenly, and I intend to continue learning. Then he did something that made Madeleine's heart jump. He turned slightly toward the envoys and said, in careful English, Gentlemen, I thank you for your patience. The Englishman blinked, surprised. Louis continued in German, slower but clear. I respect your precision. The German envoy's eyebrows rose. Louis added a short phrase in Italian, polite and graceful. The Italian diplomat's smile widened. Then Louis faced Volkov, met his eyes, and offered a brief sentence in Russian, not perfect but understandable and humble in its effort. Volkov's amusement faded into something closer to respect. Madeleine felt her throat tighten. He was not showing off. He was showing that he had heard her lesson, that words carried dignity, and dignity could be shared instead of hoarded. Lady Eleanor's fan stilled. For once, she did not look entertained. The final documents were prepared for signature. Pens were offered. Wax and seals waited. Delacroix said, If all parties agree, we proceed. The Englishman nodded. Agreed. The Italian diplomat said, Agreed. The German envoy said, Agreed. Volkov paused, eyes on Louis, then spoke in French. Agreed. The room exhaled. Louis signed first. One name steady, decisive. Then the envoys signed in turn. Madeleine watched the ink form on paper, and she felt something in her chest loosen, as if she had been holding her breath since the first reception. When the last signature dried, Delacroix said, It is done. A murmur rose again, this time approving. Courtiers leaned forward. Smiles appeared. Louis stood. The room quieted at once, because princes did not stand without intent. He spoke in French, clear and controlled. Before you depart, I will speak plainly. Madeleine's pulse spiked. She knew what was coming, and still she was not ready. Louis's gaze swept the room, not lingering on anyone long enough for them to feel singled out, yet making each person feel included in responsibility. These negotiations have taught me something, he said. Not merely about treaties, about humility. A few courtiers shifted, uneasy at that word. Louis continued, I was nearly disgraced by pride. Not the pride of my house, but the pride of pretending I could do alone what requires understanding. Volkov's eyes remained on him, unreadable. Louis's voice did not waver. I will not pretend again. He turned slightly, just enough that the room had to see Madeleine without him pointing at her like an exhibit. Madeleine has served as interpreter under my direct authority, he said. She has spoken with precision, restraint, and loyalty to clarity. Lady Eleanor's lips pressed tight. Louis continued, It is my duty to protect the integrity of this work. Therefore, I formally appoint her as interpreter to my office beyond this signing, and I place her under my protection. Whispers stirred, then caught in throats. Protection was a word with weight. Louis lifted his chin a fraction. If any person here believes that competence becomes less valuable when it is held by a servant, I invite them to reflect on the cost of such foolishness. A few faces reddened. No one spoke. Delacroix's pen paused mid-air. Louis's voice softened, but only slightly. And because I will not ask her to bear the burden of whispers alone, I will also announce this. Madeleine's breath stopped. Louis's gaze found hers briefly, not as command, as question. Her fingers curled against her palm. The wax-sealed letter in his pocket felt like a heartbeat she could not hear but trusted. Madeleine gave the smallest nod. Louis turned back to the room. With Madeleine's consent, he said, I intend to make her my wife. Silence struck like a clean bell. Then a ripple of stunned murmurs, a sharp intake of breath from somewhere near Lady Eleanor, a chair shifting, a cough quickly swallowed. Volkov's expression did not change, but his eyes narrowed with calculation that now had nowhere to land. The Englishman blinked, then smiled faintly, as if he had just witnessed something unexpectedly brave. The Italian diplomat let out a soft laugh, pleased. A love story in a treaty hall. The German envoy frowned, then said flatly, "If she is competent, she is competent." Lady Eleanor's fan trembled in her hand. Louis's voice remained steady. "This union will be recognized within my household and protected by my authority. It is not a whim. It is a decision made with full respect for duty and dignity." Father Armand stepped forward, calm, and said, "And it is made with honor." A few heads turned toward the chaplain, as if his support transformed scandal into legitimacy. Delacroix rose, voice formal. "The appointment and the protection order are documented." Louis nodded once, satisfied. He did not wait for applause. He did not demand approval. He simply offered a bow to the envoys. "Gentlemen, we conclude," he said. The envoys stood, returned bows, and departed in orderly fashion as diplomacy required. Even Shock was forced to wear manners. The observers began to disperse too, some whispering behind gloved hands, others staring as if Madeleine had become a living contradiction. Lady Eleanor lingered near the doorway, watching Madeleine with narrowed eyes. As Louis spoke briefly with Delacroix, Lady Eleanor stepped closer, smile sharp as lace. "So," she said softly, "the palace has decided to elevate its own maid." Madeleine kept her voice gentle. "The palace decided nothing, my lady. His Highness did." Lady Eleanor's smile tightened. "Do not mistake a man's impulse for history." Madeleine met her gaze, quiet and steady. "History is often made by impulses that refuse to be ashamed." Lady Eleanor's eyes flashed. "You think yourself clever." Madeleine's voice stayed calm. "I think myself grateful, to be honest." Lady Eleanor's fan snapped open. "Be careful. Love is praised in ballads, but punished in corridors." Madeleine breathed in slowly. "Then it is fortunate I will no longer walk corridors alone." Lady Eleanor's smile faltered for the first time. She recovered quickly, but her eyes had changed. "We shall see." She swept away with her friends, leaving a trail of perfume and displeasure. Madeleine's knees threatened to weaken now that the hardest part was done. Louis returned to her side as the hall emptied. He spoke softly, for her alone. "Are you well?" Madeleine exhaled shakily. "You said it." "I did," he replied, and there was something almost tender in his voice. "And the roof did not fall." Madeleine's lips parted. Then she let out a breath that was almost laughter. "It still might." Louis's gaze held hers. "Then let it fall. We will rebuild." Father Armand approached, expression calm. "You have made enemies today," Louis answered evenly. "I had them already." Father Armand's eyes moved to Madeleine. "And you have made yourself visible." Madeleine swallowed. "Yes." Father Armand nodded. "Then remember, visibility is dangerous, but it is also power. Use it kindly." Madeleine's throat tightened. "I will try." Delacroix bowed. "Your Highness." "Arrangements for the official notice?" Louis replied. "Later. For now I want quiet." Delacroix nodded and withdrew. Father Armand hesitated, then said, "I will be in the chapel if you need me." Louis inclined his head. "Thank you, Father." When they were alone, the hall felt strangely too large. Madeleine's hands trembled. "You promised me choice," she whispered. Louis stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. "I still do." Madeleine stared at him. "Then ask me again, here, not as a declaration, as a question." Louis's breath slowed. He nodded once. "Madeleine," he said quietly, "will you marry me?" The simplicity of it broke something in her chest she had kept hardened for years. She swallowed hard. "If I say yes, you will be mocked." "I have survived mockery," Louis said. "If I say yes," she continued, voice shaking, "you will be pressured to regret me." "Then I will disappoint them," he replied. Madeleine's eyes stung. "If I say yes, I will be expected to become someone else." Louis's gaze softened. "Then I will forbid it." Madeleine gave a breathless sound. "You cannot forbid people's expectations." "I can refuse to let them rule you," he said. "And I can remind you when they are loud, that you are not here by permission. You are here by choice." Her throat tightened. "And if my choice falters one day?" Louis did not hesitate. "Then we will speak again, and you will be free to choose anew. I will not bind you with fear." Madeleine stared at him, as if he were speaking a language she had never heard and somehow understood perfectly. She whispered, "No one has ever offered me that." Louis answered, "Then let me be the one who does." Madeleine drew a careful breath. She thought of her mother's words in the letter. "My daughter's mind is not a sin." She thought of the corridors where she had been made small. She thought of the treaty hall where her voice had been heard without shame. And she thought of Louis, standing before ambassadors, telling the world he would not pretend again. Madeleine's lips trembled. "Yes," she said. Louis went still, as if he had to be certain he heard correctly. "Say it again," he murmured, not commanding, almost pleading. Madeleine lifted her chin. "Yes, Louis." His breath caught at his own name on her tongue. He did not touch her immediately. He simply looked at her, as if he could not believe he was allowed to. Then, with the utmost care, he lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles, a gesture so proper it could be performed in any drawing room, and yet so intimate it made Madeleine's knees soften. She whispered, "Do not turn me into a symbol." Louis's voice was rough with feeling he kept controlled. "Then do not turn yourself into a ghost. Stand beside me, speak. Be real." Madeleine swallowed. "I am afraid. I know," he said. "And I love you for standing anyway." The word love struck her like warmth. Madeleine's eyes filled. "You should not say that so easily." "It is not easy," Louis replied. "It is simply true." They left the hall together, not hurried, not hidden. Servants bowed. Courtiers stared. Whispers followed like a distant wind. Louis did not flinch. When they reached the chapel, Father Armand was waiting, as if he had known where their feet would carry them. He looked at them both and said quietly, "Have you chosen?" Louis answered, "We have." Madeleine's voice trembled, but she said, "We have." Father Armand's expression softened. "Then I will do what I was meant to do when your mother first begged me. I will witness joy, not fear." Louis's gaze went to Madeleine. "Not today," he said softly. "We will not rush her." Madeleine startled. "You would wait?" Louis nodded. "I would wait a lifetime if you asked it." Madeleine's throat tightened. "Then do not wait a lifetime." Louis's breath caught. Father Armand lifted a brow. "Child, be certain." Madeleine swallowed hard. "I am certain of one thing. I do not want to hide anymore." Louis's voice softened. "Then we will not hide." Father Armand nodded once, calm. "Then we begin with betrothal properly announced and we proceed to marriage with dignity." Madeleine whispered, "And if the court refuses dignity?" Father Armand replied, "Then the court will learn it." Louis let out a quiet breath that might have been laughter. "Father Armand, you sound like a general." Father Armand's mouth twitched. "I fight different battles." Madeleine stood between them, heart pounding, and felt something she had never allowed herself to feel in this palace. Belonging. Not the belonging of blood or title, the belonging of being chosen without shame. Later, when the chapel's candles burned lower, Louis and Madeleine stood near the side altar, away from curious eyes. The palace was still outside, waiting with its rules, but inside this small hush, Madeleine could finally speak without fear of being overheard. "I learned languages because silence was not enough," she told him. Louis held her gaze. "And now?" "Now I want to learn how to live," she whispered. Louis's voice was gentle. "Then we will learn together." Madeleine's lips trembled. "Promise me one thing." "Anything," he said. "Never let me forget I was more than what they called me," she said. Louis replied without hesitation, "And never let me forget I was less than I pretended to be." Madeleine let out a breath, and a quiet smile broke through her fear at last. Louis lifted her hand again, and this time he held it, not as a prince displaying a conquest, but as a man anchoring himself to what was real. Outside, whispers would continue. In salons, people would pretend to be shocked while secretly thrilled to have a new story. Lady Eleanor would sharpen her manners into weapons of implication. Even Volkov would report home with careful phrasing. But the treaty was signed. The record had been uncovered. The Duke's influence had been cut from the negotiations without spectacle, and the maid who spoke 8 languages was no longer a hidden voice in the shadows. She was a woman with a name, a future, and a hand held openly in the light. And if anyone in that palace still believed a person's worth depended on how quietly they could be erased, they would now have to face a new, undeniable truth. Sometimes the bravest love is not the kind that steals kisses in secret, but the kind that stands in a crowded room and says with steady breath, "This is my chosen life, and I will not be ashamed of it." Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.